Some nights end with silence, but this one refused to die. Tonight you will enter a crime so dark, a truth so twisted that daylight itself could never break it. Welcome to Dark Pulse, your home for chilling crime, suspense, and thriller stories. Tell us in the comments where and when you are watching. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next mystery that will keep you awake at night. A night that never ended. The story of that night, the night that never ended, didn't begin with shadows or storms. It began with a dream. A dream so ordinary, so deceptively fragile that no one who heard it could have guessed the nightmare it would eventually weave. My name is Ethan Cole, and for as long as I can remember, I have been running. Not from the police, not from debts, though I've had my fair share of those, but from the invisible weight of a life that never seemed to belong to me. I grew up in the flat gray streets of Dayton, Ohio, in a cramped apartment that smelled of fried grease and broken promises. My father was a man who vanished before I was old enough to ask him why, and my mother worked 2 jobs until exhaustion dragged her into an early grave. I was 17 when I realized the world didn't care for dreamers like me. Yet the only thing that kept me moving from one dead-end job to another was a fantasy I clung to with desperate fists. Someday I would find a place of my own. Not an apartment, not a trailer, not some dull suburb shack. No, I dreamed of a house that would silence the restless echo inside me. A place grand enough to erase my childhood of scarcity. Dark enough to hide every mistake I had ever made. And isolated enough that the world could no longer spit me out like something it had no use for. That fantasy followed me everywhere. It followed me when I worked night shifts at gas stations, when I painted fences in towns I can't even remember, when I drifted from one friend's couch to another. It was my one constant, the picture in my head of a home that would make me more than the hollow, wandering soul I was. It was that dream that led me to Ravenwood, Maine. Ravenwood wasn't the sort of town that appeared on maps, at least not the ones people actually used. A fishing village turned ghost town, with weather-beaten docks, fog-choked streets, and locals who spoke in whispers as if the air itself carried secrets too heavy to voice. I arrived there one late autumn evening, chasing a rumor of construction work at the harbor. I had no intention of staying. But then I saw it. The house. It sat on the farthest edge of the cliff overlooking the merciless waves of the Atlantic. A sprawling Victorian mansion, skeletal and crumbling with shattered windows that looked like hollow eyes staring out to sea. The locals called it the Hollow House. I remember the first time I asked about it at a diner downtown. The waitress, an older woman with cigarette burns on her apron, froze mid-pour as if I had just spoken a curse. "No one talks about that place," she muttered, sliding the coffee cup toward me. "Best you forget you ever saw it." But I couldn't forget. I walked miles just to stand before its rusted gates. The house was a ruin, no doubt about it. The paint peeled like dead skin, the porch sagged with rot, and the iron fence was wrapped in wild thorns. Yet something in it called to me. Not beauty, not wealth, something deeper. As if the house had been waiting for me, whispering that all my wandering, all my failures had been leading me here. A legend clung to it, of course. In Ravenwood, everyone knew the tale of the Hollow House. They said Dawn never truly touched it, that the house was cursed by a widow who lost her family in one endless stormy night. Some claimed they saw lights flickering in its broken windows, though no one lived there. Others swore they heard the sound of a woman weeping when the wind carried across the cliffs. But to me, the curse wasn't a warning, it was a promise. For the first time in my life, I felt as though my dream had shape, wood, and stone. I could see myself inside it, repairing its halls. Standing on its balcony with the ocean roaring beneath me, daring the world to try and throw me away again. I didn't have the money, of course. My pockets barely held enough to buy a meal, let alone a mansion, even a rotting one. But I had something more dangerous than wealth. I had obsession. Night after night, I returned to that cliff. I stood in the shadows, staring at the house until my eyes blurred and the sea air froze my lungs. The locals avoided me, whispering that I was cursed just for coveting the place. They weren't entirely wrong, because the more I thought of the hollow house, the less I cared for anything else. Food, money, friends, even survival. And then one evening, when the tide was high and the fog rolled in thick as wool, I saw her. Grace Hall. At first glance, she didn't belong there. She wasn't one of Ravenwood's weather-beaten ghosts, but a spark of something brighter. Young, beautiful in a way that money polishes but doesn't entirely create, with a restlessness in her eyes that matched my own. She stood by the iron gates of the hollow house, sketchbook in hand, her long coat whipping in the wind. She was drawing the mansion, capturing its broken majesty with strokes that trembled in the cold. I remember the way she looked at me when our eyes met, like I wasn't just another drifter passing through. "Do you know the story of this house?" she asked. Her voice carried the kind of curiosity that can either save a soul or doom it. I smiled. "I know enough. It's cursed." She tilted her head, studying me. Or maybe it's just misunderstood. That was the first time I heard her laugh. Light, almost reckless, as though the weight of her wealthy world had slipped for just a moment. And in that instant, standing with the Atlantic roaring behind us and the hollow house looming like a shadowed sentinel, I felt something shift. The dream that had haunted me for years was no longer mine alone. It was hers too. And together we would claim it, whatever the cost. The Grace Hall was not the kind of woman you expected to find in a place like Ravenwood. Her presence was like a match struck in a cave, bright, fleeting, almost dangerous. Everything about her whispered of a different life, the expensive cut of her coat, the softness in her hands unused to labor, the way she looked at things with a mix of boredom and longing, as though she had seen too much of one world and not nearly enough of another. I didn't know who she was then, not really. I didn't know she was the daughter of Charles Hall, a real estate mogul in New York whose name appeared in glossy magazines, or that she was worth more money than I could imagine in 10 lifetimes. To me, she was just a girl at the gates of a house I already considered mine, sketching its decay as though she were trying to trap its soul on paper. "You come here often?" she asked, snapping her book shut when the wind threatened to tear the pages free. "Every night," I admitted without shame. "I can't stay away from it." Grace's smile was small but knowing. "Then you understand." We fell into conversation as though it were the most natural thing in the world. I told her about the first time I saw the hollow house, how it felt like destiny. She told me she had been brought to Ravenwood by her aunt, Eleanor Whitmore, who insisted Grace needed fresh sea air away from the stifling circles of Manhattan high society. Eleanor, Grace said, hated the house. "Superstitions," she scoffed. "But I see something else in it, something untamed." There was a fire in her eyes when she spoke, and I recognized it instantly. The same restless fire that burned in me. We were two people cut from different cloths, her silk, me rags. But our hunger was the same. Over the days that followed, I found excuses to linger near the places she went. Ravenwood's faded bookstore, the pier where fishermen smoked pipes and muttered about storms, the crooked path to the cliff where the hollow house loomed. Sometimes she sought me out first, sketchbook in hand, daring me to walk the grounds with her, though the locals crossed themselves at the sight. It wasn't long before the whispers began. Ravenwood was small and strangers stood out. A drifter and an heiress walking together stirred talk in the diner, mutters at the gas pump, sidelong looks at the grocery store. "She'll never last here," the waitress who once warned me about the Hollow House said. "Girls like that don't stay in ghost towns." But Grace did, for me. One evening, as the last glow of sun died behind the Atlantic and the Hollow House cast its long shadow over us, Grace leaned against the rusted gate and said, "I don't care what they say. This house, it feels like freedom." For the first time in my life, I spoke the truth of my dream aloud. It's more than that. It's the only place where I'll ever belong. Her gaze softened, and I swear in that moment she saw me, not the drifter, not the empty pockets, but the man who craved something greater. "Then let's make it ours," she whispered. The words struck me like lightning. Ours, not hers, not mine. Ours. She was willing to defy her family, to risk her reputation, to bind herself to the ruin that had claimed my soul. In her eyes, it wasn't madness, it was fate. Still, Ravenwood wasn't about to make it easy. Grace's Aunt Eleanor confronted us not long after. She found us standing by the cliff, our hands nearly touching, though neither of us dared close the gap in her presence. Eleanor was a tall, severe woman with the kind of authority that silences rooms. "Grace!" she snapped, her voice cutting through the ocean wind. "Your father will be horrified if he hears you've been consorting with people of no consequence." Her eyes sliced toward me, sharp as glass. I should have been ashamed. I should have stepped back. But I met her gaze without flinching. "I don't care what father thinks," Grace said firmly. "This place, this town, it's different. It makes me feel alive." Eleanor's lips pressed into a line of disdain. "This place makes you a fool. Do you know what they call that house? The Hollow House. Do you know why? Because it eats people whole. Families vanish, fortunes rot, and still some idiot always comes thinking they'll be the one to tame it. You'll be next, Grace. Don't let this boy drag you down with him." Grace's hand brushed against mine, hidden by her coat. "I make my own choices, Aunt." Eleanor's eyes lingered on me for a long, damning moment before she turned away, muttering, "If you stay here, Grace, you'll never see the morning again." The warning should have chilled me. Instead, it thrilled me. Because Eleanor had just confirmed what I already believed. The Hollow House wasn't just a ruin, it was a challenge. A cursed treasure waiting for someone bold enough or desperate enough to claim it. And with Grace at my side, I believed I could. That night, I lay awake in the cheap room I rented above the Ravenwood bar, staring at the cracked ceiling while Grace's words replayed in my head. "Let's make it ours." The hunger in me deepened, gnawing like a beast. For years I had drifted, half-starved for meaning, for permanence. Now it was within reach. A girl who believed in me, a house that called to me, a chance to stop running. But obsession is a dangerous fuel. It burns fast, it blinds, and it devours everything in its path. I told myself I was chasing love. I told myself Grace was my destiny. But deep down, in the darkest corners of my heart, I knew the truth. I wasn't in love with Grace. I was in love with the house. And that single truth, silent, poisonous, undeniable, was the first thread in the web that would trap us both. The following weeks blurred together like smoke, each day threaded with Grace's presence, each night haunted by the silhouette of the Hollow House against the restless sea. I had known obsessions before, cards, bottles, schemes that promised quick money, but none had consumed me the way this one did. The house wasn't just a structure of wood and stone, it was a mirror of everything I felt inside, broken, abandoned, yet still standing. And Grace was the spark that made me believe the dream could become real. We spent hours walking the grounds, weaving between thorns and fallen beams, mapping out how we would restore it. Grace sketched every detail: the cracked staircase, the vine-choked windows, the gaping roof that revealed the stars. She spoke of filling the halls with laughter and light. I listened, nodding, but in my mind I pictured something different. I saw silence, control, permanence, a fortress against the world that had spat me out. Sometimes, when she caught me staring too long at the house, she would smile and ask, "What are you thinking?" I always lied. Just about us. But the truth was harder, darker. I was thinking about how nothing, not Grace's aunt, not the locals, not even Grace herself, would keep me from this house. The locals' warnings grew louder the more time we spent there. At the diner, fishermen would fall silent when we entered. At the docks, men spat over their shoulders, muttering about storms and curses. One old man, a fisherman named Harold Pike, grabbed my arm one evening as I passed. His eyes were milky with age, but his grip was iron. "Leave that place alone," he rasped. "The Hollow House isn't for the living. I've seen what it does. First it whispers, then it takes." Grace tugged me away, laughing nervously, but the old man's words lodged in me like splinters. Not because I believed him, but because I feared that somewhere, in some twisted way, he might be right. The house had whispered to me, and I wasn't about to let it go. It was around this time that Grace began opening up about her family. "My father thinks he can decide my life," she told me one evening as we sat on the cliff's edge, the sea spraying cold salt into our faces. "Every move I make, every choice, I'm just another piece in his empire. He doesn't see me. He doesn't even want to." She looked at me then, eyes burning with defiance. "But you see me, don't you?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to mean it. And maybe part of me did, but another part, bigger, hungrier, saw only the house and the wealth she represented as the key to unlock it. Still, I squeezed her hand and said, "Of course I do." Her smile then was enough to make me forget, if only for a heartbeat, the darker truths twisting in me. One night, Grace smuggled me into the Grand Inn where she and Eleanor stayed. The hallways smelled of lavender and wood polish, so different from the damp stink of my rented room. She showed me letters from her father, cold commands disguised as advice. "Return at once. Stop this foolishness. Your marriage will be arranged soon enough." Grace tore the letter in half, her hands shaking. "I won't be owned anymore," she whispered. "Not by him. Not by anyone." Her eyes searched mine, desperate. "If I chose you, Ethan, if I chose this life, this house, would you stay? Would you fight for it with me?" And for once, I didn't have to lie. Yes. We kissed then, and for a fleeting moment, I let myself believe it was love that bound us. Maybe it was in some fractured way, but even as her lips touched mine, I could feel the Hollow House looming in my mind, a darker bride waiting for me to claim her. Eleanor, of course, was not blind. She confronted me alone a few days later, cornering me outside the grocery store. Her voice was low, controlled, but her eyes burned with fury. "I don't know what game you're playing, Mr. Cole," she said, "but I will not allow you to ruin Grace. She's vulnerable, lonely, and you're exploiting it." Her words cut sharper than I expected, mostly because they weren't entirely untrue. Still, I met her glare with steady defiance. "I care about her," I said. Eleanor's mouth curled in a bitter smile. "You care about that cursed house. Everyone sees it. You're not the first drifter to think he could tame it. But I promise you this, you won't be the last to lose everything to it." She stepped closer, so near I could smell the peppermint on her breath. "Leave, Ethan. Walk away now and maybe you'll still have a future. Stay and I swear you'll never escape that night." Her words were meant to frighten me, but they only fed the fire. Every warning, every attempt to drive me away only convinced me more that the Hollow House was mine. that it had always been meant for me. Later, when I told Grace about Eleanor's threats, she laughed bitterly. She thinks she can control me like father, but I won't let her. I'll prove to them both that I can choose my own life. She took my hands in hers. Let's buy the house, Ethan. Let's start over. You and me. No one else. And just like that, the dream moved from fantasy to possibility. But possibility is a dangerous thing. It blinds you to the cracks, the shadows, the voices warning you to turn back. It whispers that you can defy fate, rewrite curses, outsmart destiny. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the wind moan through Ravenwood's empty streets, I thought of Grace's words. You and me. No one else. I thought of Eleanor's warning. You'll never escape that night. And I thought of the hollow house watching me from the cliffs. Its black windows like eyes that never closed. I should have been afraid. Instead, I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running anymore. I was home. There are nights you remember because they shine, and there are nights you remember because they scar. The night Grace told me she was ready to defy her family and claim the hollow house was both. We were standing on the cliff again, the wind cutting sharp, the ocean below roaring like some restless beast. Grace had her sketchbook tucked under her arm, her cheeks flushed with the cold. She turned to me with that smile, bright, reckless, unshaken by the storm of warnings that had tried to drive us apart. I've been thinking, she said. Father will never let me live the life I want. Eleanor will never stop trying to control me. The only way to be free is to step beyond both of them. And the only place that feels like mine is here, with you, in this house. She gestured toward the hollow house, its blackened silhouette jagged against the stars. Most people saw ruin when they looked at it. I saw destiny. What are you saying? I asked, though I already knew. I'm saying, Grace whispered, her voice trembling but firm, let's buy it, together. Let's make it ours before anyone can stop us. The words hung in the salt air, heavy as a vow. For years I had dreamed of this moment, though I'd never dared believe it would come true. Yet now it stood before me, wrapped in Grace's determination and her wealth. For the first time, the impossible felt within reach. But with that promise came something else, something colder. Because I knew in the secret places of my heart that Grace wasn't the reason this dream was possible. She was the means. The hollow house was my true bride, my true obsession. Grace's money, her rebellion, her love, these were only keys to unlock its doors. I didn't tell her that, of course. I pulled her close and said the words she wanted, the words she needed. Yes, let's do it. Her relief was palpable. She laughed, a sound so pure it almost erased my darker thoughts, and pressed her lips to mine. But even as I kissed her back, my eyes drifted over her shoulder to the looming house. And I swear in that moment the shadows in its windows shifted, as though something inside stirred at the promise we had made. From that night onward, everything moved faster. Grace called her lawyer in New York, Nathaniel Miller. A young man with slick hair and sharper eyes who had always managed her small inheritance apart from her father's control. Nathaniel arrived in Ravenwood days later, irritated but loyal to Grace. "This is madness," he said the first time he saw the hollow house. He stood at the gates, shoes sinking into the wet earth, staring up at the skeletal structure. "This isn't a home, Grace. It's a ruin. It'll eat your money faster than the sea eats the shore." Grace only smiled, clutching my hand. "It's not about money, Nathaniel. It's about freedom." Nathaniel's gaze flicked toward me then, cool and measuring. I felt his suspicion before he spoke it. "And him? Is this freedom or another cage you don't realize you're stepping into?" Grace bristled. "Ethan is with me. That's all you need to know." Nathaniel sighed, defeated by her resolve. "Fine. I'll handle the paperwork. But when this house collapses around you, and it will, I hope you'll remember I warned you." Warnings, warnings, always warnings, from Eleanor, from the locals, from Nathaniel. The world seemed intent on convincing us we were walking into our own graves. But Grace brushed them off, and I fed on their fear. Every warning only strengthened my conviction that the Hollow House was meant for me. Yet not everyone dismissed the curse so lightly. One evening, Grace and I were leaving the diner when we crossed paths with Martha Green, an elderly woman who lived on the edge of town. She was known as a kind of fortune-teller, though most dismissed her as senile. Still, her eyes, sharp as broken glass, seemed to pierce through me when she stepped into our path. "You're walking into the Hollow House?" she asked Grace directly. Grace hesitated, then lifted her chin. "Yes, we are." Martha's voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to carry in the wind. "Then listen well, child. If you move into that house, you'll never see the morning. The night will swallow you whole, and it will never end." Her bony fingers brushed Grace's wrist. Grace flinched but tried to smile. "It's just an old house. Ghost stories don't scare me." But later, when we were alone, I caught her staring at the mansion with unease. "Do you think there's any truth to it?" she asked. I shook my head, though the hairs on my neck prickled. "Curses are for people who need excuses. We'll make our own fate." She nodded, but the doubt never fully left her eyes. The final step came when Nathaniel, under protest, secured the purchase. Grace transferred part of her inheritance, and with a signature scrawled in ink, the Hollow House was ours. I remember the day we walked through its doors for the first time as owners. Dust rose in clouds with every step. The wooden floor groaned under our weight. The air smelled of mold, salt, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. Grace twirled in the center of the ruined foyer, her laughter echoing against the cracked walls. "It's perfect," she cried. "It just needs love." I stood there, my chest tight, staring up at the grand staircase with its broken banister, the empty chandelier swaying slightly, though no wind blew inside. Perfect wasn't the word I would have used. Not for her, at least. But for me. For me, it was everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. Grace lay beside me in the mattress we'd dragged into one of the least damaged rooms. Her breathing steady, her hand curled over my chest. But I stared at the ceiling, listening. And in the silence, I heard it. A whisper. Soft, low, curling through the air like smoke. I couldn't make out the words, but the intent was clear. The house was speaking, and it was welcoming me home. By the time Grace Hall became a constant in my life, Ravenwood had already started whispering about us. The town was small, suffocatingly small, and nothing went unnoticed. The locals could sense when the tide shifted, when a storm brewed offshore, and when two strangers began circling each other with a gravity that promised trouble. But before all that, the rumors, the stares, the warnings, there was just Grace. I can still see her even now, as though she's etched into the back of my eyelids. The first day I truly met her was not at the gates of the Hollow House, but at the town's bookstore cafe, a dim little place that smelled of damp paper and old wood. The shop was run by a man named Henry Locke, whose back was permanently bent as if under the weight of secrets no one else wanted to carry. Grace was there alone, a sketchbook open beside her cup of untouched tea. Her Aunt Eleanor was nowhere in sight. I remember hesitating at the threshold because people like Grace did not belong in places like that. And yet there she was. Sunlight through stained glass, a splash of color in Ravenwood's graying palette. When she noticed me, she smiled, and it was not the polite, distant smile of someone bred in wealth. It was warm, curious, an invitation. "You're the man who stands at the cliff, aren't you?" she asked. Her voice startled me, soft but certain, like she had been waiting to speak to me. I pulled out the chair opposite her. "And you're the girl who sketches a ruin like it's a cathedral." She laughed. It wasn't the laughter of someone mocking. It was free, genuine, unguarded. "It is a cathedral, of a kind. A cathedral of broken dreams." That was Grace. Always seeing poetry where others saw dust. We spent hours in that cafe talking. I told her pieces of my life, never the whole truth, just enough to paint myself as more tragic than flawed. She told me about hers, though she rarely named it directly. She spoke of suffocation, of expectations, of a father whose empire was built on control, of a life mapped out like a prison sentence, finishing schools, arranged suitors, polite conversations where every word was weighed. "Do you know what it's like to have everything and yet nothing?" she asked me, her eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window. "Yes," I said without hesitation, "because I did." The more we talked, the more we discovered the strange symmetry of our lives. She was born into wealth but starved of freedom. I was born into poverty but starved of stability. Where she longed to escape walls, I longed to build them, and at the center of both our hungers stood the hollow house, decaying, cursed, but somehow radiant in our imaginations. From then on, Grace and I were rarely apart. We walked the town's narrow streets, drawing sidelong stares. We wandered the fog-choked pier where fishermen muttered superstitions under their breath. We climbed the cliffs together, always returning to the hollow house as though pulled by invisible strings. She sketched endlessly, pages filled with its jagged outline. Sometimes she drew me too, though she never showed me those sketches. "Not yet," she would say with a secret smile. But the closeness brought consequences. One evening as we left the cafe, Eleanor appeared. She had the uncanny knack of arriving precisely when her presence was most unwelcome. Her voice carried across the street, sharp as a blade. "Grace." Grace stiffened. Eleanor was dressed in her usual austere black coat, her silver hair coiled in a bun that seemed to hold her entire spine in place. Her eyes, pale and unforgiving, swept over me before fixing on her niece. "What is this?" Eleanor demanded. Grace's chin lifted. "This is Ethan." "That tells me nothing. Who is he? A laborer? A drifter? Another one of those lost men who come here chasing myths?" I forced myself not to flinch. "He's my friend," Grace said firmly. Eleanor's laugh was humorless. "Friends do not linger at cursed houses. Friends do not leech on women with fortunes." I stepped forward then, unable to stay silent. "I don't want her fortune. I want her, and I want the house." The words slipped out before I could stop them, reckless and raw. Eleanor's lips thinned. "Then you'll destroy her, just as that house has destroyed everyone who ever tried to claim it." Grace took my hand in hers, her defiance blazing. "I make my own choices, Aunt. This is mine." The silence that followed was heavy. Eleanor's eyes flicked between us, measuring, calculating. Finally, she said, "Then may God have mercy on you both." And with that, she turned away, her shadow stretching long across the cobblestones. Grace's hand trembled in mine, though she tried to hide it. "She doesn't understand," she whispered. "She never has." I didn't answer, because part of me wondered if Eleanor understood more than either of us dared admit. That night, Grace and I sat on the cliffs, the hollow house looming before us. She traced the outline of the broken towers in her sketchbook and said, "Do you feel it too? Like the house is alive?" I did. But what I felt wasn't life. It was hunger. And the first time Grace invited me to walk with her alone beyond the cliffs, the air was thick with fog and the world felt like it had shrunk to only two things: her laughter and the sea's roar. We walked the winding path that led away from town, the one locals avoided after dusk. Grace didn't care. She said she wanted to see the hollow house from every angle, wanted to sketch it as though by capturing its every line she could unravel its mystery. Most people look at it and see death, she said, pausing to draw. But I see possibility. Doesn't it make you feel like anything is possible, Ethan? Yes, I said, though I wasn't sure if my voice was steady. Because what I felt when I looked at that house wasn't possibility. It was possession. I wanted it the way a drowning man wants air. We found ourselves at the iron gates again. The chains that once held them shut were broken, and the wind howled through their rusted bars like an animal's breath. Grace pressed her hand against the iron as though feeling for its heartbeat. "It's waiting," she whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For us." Her words lodged deep in me. For us. As though she had been sent here not by her family or by chance, but for me. For this house. That was the night she told me more about her family. About the father who treated her like another acquisition, a pawn to trade in business alliances. About the endless dinners where suitors paraded like merchandise. About the suffocation of having everything except freedom. "I'd give it all up," she said bitterly. "Every penny, every necklace, every staged photograph, just for one day of a life I actually chose." And then she looked at me. "You choose your life, don't you, Ethan? You drift, you wander, you're free." I almost laughed at the irony. Free? I was shackled by poverty, by failure, by hunger for something I couldn't name. But to her, my lack of ties looked like liberation. And I let her believe it. Because her belief made me stronger. We began meeting in secret after that. Eleanor grew suspicious quickly, tightening her leash. But Grace slipped away whenever she could. We walked the fog-choked streets, the cliffs, the empty docks. She spoke about art and escape, and I spoke about dreams and building. Slowly, inevitably, our conversation circled back to the hollow house. Grace wanted to paint it, to transform its decay into beauty. I wanted to own it, to transform its decay into permanence. She never saw the difference. One afternoon, as we sat in the cafe with the rain lashing against the windows, Grace leaned forward, her voice low. "My father would hate you." I raised a brow. "Why's that?" "Because you're not chosen, not polished, not one of his men with perfect smiles and perfect lies." I smirked. "And what about you? Would you hate me too?" Her answer came without hesitation. "No. You're the first real thing in my life." Those words struck me harder than I expected. Real. To her, I wasn't a failure or a drifter. I was real. Solid, something her world had never given her. But beneath the warmth of her confession, a colder thought took root. If I was her first real thing, maybe I could be her last. Our closeness didn't go unnoticed. Whispers turned into open stares. In Ravenwood, people didn't hide their disapproval. At the docks, a fisherman named Caleb Warren spat tobacco at my boots as Grace and I passed. "She'll be dead before spring if she keeps following you." Grace squeezed my arm, trying to pull me along, but I caught Caleb's gaze. "Why?" He grinned, a toothless, chilling grin. "Because that house doesn't let anyone leave. You'll see." Grace tugged me away, her voice shaking. "Don't listen to him. They're just bitter old men." But the words echoed in my head long after. One evening, Grace slipped a letter into my hand. It was from her father. The script was bold, commanding. "Grace, return at once. Your behavior is disgraceful. I will not allow you to waste yourself in some God-forsaken hole. Your future has already been arranged." She tore it up before my eyes, her hands trembling with fury. "I won't go back. I won't be sold off like property." Her defiance set something alight in me. "Then stay," I told her. Stay here with me, stay in the hollow house. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, but once spoken, they couldn't be unsaid. Grace froze, her breath catching. Then she smiled, slow and dangerous. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. The decision was made in that moment. The lines between dream and reality blurred. It was no longer a fantasy we whispered on cliff tops. It was a plan, a vow. Of course, Eleanor tried to interfere. She cornered Grace at the inn, her voice echoing through the thin walls. I overheard every word. You think this boy loves you? He doesn't. He loves that house. Can't you see it? It's not you he's staring at when he's silent. It's those broken windows. Grace's voice shook with anger. I don't care. Maybe we both love it. Maybe that's enough. Eleanor's reply was colder than the sea outside. You'll regret this. Mark my words, Grace. You'll regret the night you tied yourself to him. I slipped away before they caught me listening, but the words burned. Because Eleanor was right. I did love the house more than Grace. And someday, she would see it too. But for now, she believed. And that belief was the most dangerous gift she could have given me. Grace had a way of making even the gloomiest corners of Ravenwood glow. Where I saw rotting wood and peeling paint, she saw textures for her sketches. Where I saw fog choking the horizon, she saw mystery. And where I saw a cursed ruin waiting to be claimed, she saw a canvas for the life she always wanted. It was a dangerous kind of optimism, fragile, beautiful, and doomed. We began spending more and more time in the hollow house itself. At first, we only lingered by the gates, our fingers tracing the cold iron, our imaginations filling the silence. But curiosity gnawed at Grace until she pushed me to climb the gates with her one night. The chains hung broken. The rusted padlock long useless. The locals avoided the place so fiercely that no one bothered to guard it. Inside, the air was colder, heavier, as though the house exhaled its own breath. Dust coated the floors in thick layers, broken glass glittered in the moonlight, and the smell, mildew, salt, and something faintly metallic clung to us like a second skin. Grace gasped with delight. It's incredible, she whispered, pulling out her sketchbook even there in the dark. She knelt on the floor, tracing the jagged archways with hurried strokes, her eyes shining with a feverish kind of joy. I watched her, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't admit. Because while she saw art, I saw ownership. Every creaking board, every ruined beam I wanted to claim as mine. We wandered through the rooms, our footsteps echoing like intruders. Grace pointed out where we could hang her paintings, where a piano could sit, where windows might be replaced with stained glass. She spoke of warmth and light. I listened, but in my mind I imagined shadows and silence. A place where no one could find me, no one could tell me I wasn't enough. In the library, half collapsed and strewn with decayed books, Grace brushed dust off a cracked leather chair. Can't you see it? She asked, her voice soft with wonder. This place alive again? Yes, I said. But what I saw was me sitting in that chair, watching the storm lash the windows while the world outside faded away. We stayed until the moon dipped low, until the creaks and whispers of the house seemed to grow louder, less like echoes and more like voices. Grace shivered then, pressing close to me. Maybe Aunt Eleanor's right, she admitted. Maybe there is something wrong here. I tightened my arm around her. Wrong for them, not for us. The words sealed something between us, though I didn't realize then just how binding they would be. From that night onward, we returned again and again. Grace filled her sketchbook with the house's skeleton while I memorized every corner, every weakness, every locked room. It wasn't enough to look at it anymore. I needed to know it, to claim it. But Ravenwood didn't let us move unnoticed. Henry Locke, the bookstore owner, pulled me aside one morning after Grace had left with her aunt. His bent frame shook with quiet urgency. "Leave the girl alone," he hissed. "You don't know what you're doing." I bristled. "You don't know me." "I know that house," Henry snapped. His eyes were haunted, distant. "I knew the family who owned it before, good people, the Morgans. They thought they could tame it too. One stormy night, they were gone. All of them. No explanation, just gone." His hand trembled on my arm. "Don't let it take her too." I yanked away, but his words gnawed at me. Grace didn't know about the Morgans, and I didn't tell her. Some truths aren't warnings, they're temptations. Meanwhile, Grace's aunt grew more desperate. Eleanor began following us, her sharp eyes catching every glance, every touch. At the inn, she cornered me in the hallway. "You think you're clever?" she whispered, venom dripping from every word. "But you're not the first man to see dollar signs in her eyes. Do you really think she'll choose you when her father commands otherwise?" I smiled, cold and sure. "She already has." For once, Eleanor's mask cracked. Her fury blazed, but beneath it I glimpsed fear. That fear fed me. Grace, of course, only grew bolder in response. She began speaking openly about leaving New York, about building a life in Ravenwood, about turning the Hollow House into a home. "We'll prove them all wrong," she said one evening as we sat on the pier, our legs dangling above the black water. "Father, Eleanor, the whole town, they'll see we don't need them." I kissed her then, partly because I wanted to and partly because it silenced the nagging truth in my mind. She wasn't wrong. We didn't need them. We needed the house. But whispers followed us everywhere. At the market, a woman muttered, "The Hollow House will eat them alive." At the bar, a man raised his glass and sneered, "To young love, may the night be kind." At the cliffs, the children dared each other to shout curses at us, their voices breaking into uneasy laughter when the echoes returned louder than they expected. Ravenwood was watching, waiting. Some hoped we'd succeed, if only to break the curse. Most hoped we'd fail, because failure meant the world still made sense. One night, as Grace and I left the cafe, Martha Green appeared again. Her pale eyes glowed in the lamplight. She stepped into Grace's path, her voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "You're walking into darkness, child. Do you hear me? Darkness. It will not let you go." Grace tried to brush her off, but Martha caught her wrist with surprising strength. "You'll never see the morning," she hissed. "Not you, not him. The night will never end." Grace tore free, trembling. We hurried away, but I could feel her fear radiating off her like heat. When we reached the cliffs, she turned to me, her voice breaking. "What if they're right, Ethan? What if it's cursed?" I cupped her face in my hands, forcing her to meet my eyes. "They're wrong. It's not cursed. It's ours. And no one, no curse, no family, no town, is going to take it from us." She kissed me then, desperate, clinging. And in that moment, with her lips pressed to mine and the Hollow House looming behind her like a shadow that would never lift, I knew the truth I could never admit out loud. She wasn't wrong to fear, because the curse wasn't in the house. It was in me. Grace's world and mine collided like two storms meeting at sea. On the surface, we were a romance the town gossiped about, an heiress rebelling against her family, a drifter clutching at his chance to rise. But beneath that surface, every moment with her was tangled with the shadow of the Hollow House. It was never just her and me. It was always her, me, and the house. One evening, after a day spent wandering its broken halls, Grace insisted on showing me something. She led me to the attic, where a narrow window framed the endless horizon. The sunset bled red and gold across the sea, but inside the attic the air felt frozen, as though the house had trapped the light before it could fully enter. Grace spread her sketches across the dusty floorboards, dozens of drawings, each one capturing the hollow house from a different angle. Some were delicate, almost reverent. Others were frantic, lines jagged as though her hand had trembled. "Look," she said, kneeling among them. "Every time I draw it, it feels different. Alive, somehow. Like it's changing." I crouched beside her, studying the charcoal lines. In some drawings, the house seemed to lean toward us. In others, its windows looked like gaping mouths. One sketch even had shadows in the windows, shapes that Grace swore she hadn't drawn. "Do you think it's watching us?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said before I could stop myself. She shivered, but then smiled. "Good, let it watch. We'll prove we're not afraid." That was Grace, defiant even in her fear. But the house wasn't the only threat to our fragile world. Eleanor grew harsher by the day. Her disdain no longer whispered but shouted. She confronted Grace one night at the inn, her voice carrying through the thin walls. "You're throwing your life away," Eleanor snapped. "That boy will bleed you dry, and that house will bury you both." I heard Grace's reply through the door, steady and unyielding. "I'd rather die in a house I chose than live in a prison chosen for me." The words struck me even as I smiled in the shadows. She meant them. She would fight for this house as fiercely as I would. Still, Eleanor wasn't done. She approached me directly days later, cornering me near the market. "You're clever," she said, her eyes like ice. "But you're not clever enough. Men like you never win. Do you know why? Because you want too much. And the Hollow House knows how to feed on greed." I met her stare, unflinching. "Then maybe it and I are a perfect match." Her lips curled in disgust, but behind her fury I saw something else. Fear. She believed in the curse, truly believed, and in a way that only made me want the house more. Meanwhile, Grace and I began making plans. Real plans. She spoke to Nathaniel Miller again, the lawyer who had managed her inheritance. He came to Ravenwood reluctantly, muttering about wasted time, but Grace's resolve shook even his polished calm. "I'll do it," Nathaniel said after hours of arguing. "But I won't pretend this isn't madness. That house is a financial black hole, and everyone in this town seems half convinced it's a grave." Grace only smiled. "Then let it be our madness. Our grave, if it must. At least it will be ours." Nathaniel shook his head, but he began the paperwork. The closer we came to owning the Hollow House, the heavier the atmosphere grew. The townsfolk stared openly now, some with pity, others with malice. Children sang cruel rhymes when we passed, verses about ghosts and endless nights. Even the wind seemed sharper, the fog thicker. One night, as Grace and I stood at the gates, Martha Green appeared again. Her eyes glowed in the moonlight, her voice low and urgent. "You think love will save you," she rasped. "But love is nothing in that house. The night there never ends. You'll lose her. You'll lose yourself." Grace tightened her grip on my arm, defiant. "We're not afraid." Martha's gaze shifted to me, and for a heartbeat I swore she could see straight through me, through my lies, my hunger, my darker truths. "You should be," she whispered. Grace pulled me away, muttering that Martha was insane. But her hand trembled in mine, and I knew the warning had lodged in her heart. Despite everything, the gossip, the warnings, the fear, Grace's determination only deepened. She spoke of leaving New York for good, of cutting ties with her father, of starting a life that belonged to no one but us. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked me one evening as we sat on the cliff, the sea roaring below. "I'll lose everything. My family, my inheritance, my place in that world. All I'll have left is you." I kissed her hand, the perfect lover. Then you'll have enough. She smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. But inside me another truth whispered. She was wrong. She wouldn't lose everything. She would still have the house. And that, to me, was all that mattered. The day Nathaniel confirmed the purchase was set, Grace ran to me, breathless, radiant. "It's ours, Ethan," she cried, throwing her arms around me. "The Hollow House is ours." Her joy was infectious, her laughter ringing against the stormy sky. I held her close, but my eyes fixed on the looming mansion. Not ours. Mine. That night, as Grace dreamed beside me, I lay awake, listening to the house breathe around us. Every creak, every whisper in the dark felt like a welcome. The Hollow House had waited years for someone foolish enough, desperate enough, hungry enough to claim it. And I had finally answered its call. The papers were signed. The Hollow House belonged to us. Or at least that's what the deed claimed. But the truth was, the house never really belonged to anyone. It merely tolerated its occupants until it was done with them. Grace saw triumph in the signature Nathaniel secured, her smile brighter than I had ever seen. To her, it was proof that she had broken free from her father's control, proof that she had chosen her own destiny. But to me, it was the first step toward a hunger I could no longer disguise. The Hollow House was no longer just a dream. It was a possession. The town, however, didn't share in our celebration. If anything, Ravenwood grew colder. Conversations hushed when we entered the cafe. Men at the docks spat into the sea when I walked by. Even children stopped their games to stare, their small faces pale with the kind of dread they should have been too young to know. "They'll come around," Grace said, ever the optimist. "Once they see we're serious, once we make it beautiful again, they'll understand." But the town didn't want beauty. It wanted distance. The first true warning came not from the locals, but from within the house itself. On our second night as owners, I woke to find Grace standing at the foot of the bed, her face pale in the moonlight. "Did you hear it?" she whispered. "Hear what?" She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. A woman crying, somewhere in the house. I listened, the silence pressing heavy against my ears. There was nothing, just the groan of the sea below, the creak of the old beams shifting in the wind. "You dreamed it," I said, pulling her back into bed. But I wasn't sure I believed my own words. The next morning we found the words, "The night is waiting," scrawled across the dust on the foyer wall. At first I thought it was the work of vandals, but the dust around the letters was undisturbed, as though the message had appeared without human touch. Grace tried to laugh it off, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Probably kids," she said, "trying to scare us." But I saw the way her hands trembled as she traced the letters. The second warning came from Martha Green, of course. She was waiting outside the gates one morning, her gray hair wild in the wind, her eyes burning with a fevered light. "I told you," she rasped, pointing a crooked finger at us. "I told you what this house does." Grace tried to walk past her, but Martha caught her sleeve. "You think love will save you?" she hissed. "The house doesn't care for love. It cares only for night. And once it has you, it will never let you go." Grace pulled free, her voice sharp. "You're just a bitter old woman with stories. We're not afraid of your superstitions." But later, when we were alone, she confessed in a trembling voice, "What if she's right, Ethan? What if we never should have come here?" I pulled her close, stroking her hair. "She's not right. She's jealous. All of them are. They see something they can't have, something they'll never understand. But we understand. The house chose us." She nodded, though uneasily. The third warning came in blood. A group of workers from town had agreed, reluctantly, to help us with small repairs. One of them, a young man named Tommy Blake, was repairing the upstairs banister when the wood gave way beneath him. He fell 2 stories, landing with a sickening crack. He lived, but his leg was shattered beyond repair. As the other men carried him out, I caught the look in their eyes. Not anger, not even pity, but fear. "This house eats people," one of them muttered. "It's only a matter of time." By the next morning, every worker had quit. Grace tried to stay strong. She painted the walls, cleaned the dust, hung her sketches like talismans against the gloom. She told me over and over, "We'll make it ours. We'll fight for it." But each warning chipped away at her light. I saw it in the way her laughter faltered, the way her eyes darted to the shadows when the floorboards creaked, the way she woke at night gasping as though drowning in dreams. Eleanor returned too, her presence like a knife cutting through the fragile peace we tried to build. She stood in the doorway of the cafe one evening, her voice ringing out for all to hear. "You've doomed her, Ethan Cole, and when she dies, it'll be on your hands." Grace fled the room in tears, and I followed, rage boiling in my chest. But beneath the anger was something colder. Fear that Eleanor's prophecy might not be a curse at all, but a promise. Still, I told myself the warnings were lies, the accidents coincidences, the whispers meaningless. But the Hollow House was listening. And it was only just beginning. It's one thing to ignore whispers. It's another to ignore screams. And slowly, Ravenwood stopped whispering about us and began to shout its warnings in ways neither Grace nor I could easily dismiss. The first scream came in the form of a storm. It rolled in from the Atlantic with a violence I had never seen before. The sea roared like a beast in chains. The sky cracked open with lightning that turned night into fragments of blinding day. The Hollow House trembled under the assault, its old bones creaking as though it might tear apart. Grace clung to me, her face pale, her breath ragged. "It feels alive," she whispered over the thunder. "Like it's fighting to keep us here." I laughed, though it was hollow even to my own ears. "It's just a storm." But when morning came, the storm's true gift revealed itself. The cliffside path we often used to reach town was half gone, swallowed into the sea. And carved into the mud near the remaining edge were words, etched deep as though by claws. "You will never leave." Grace refused to go near it. Nathaniel, who had returned briefly to finalize legalities, tried to convince her it was vandalism, some cruel prank by the townsfolk. "Don't you see?" he argued in the parlor, pacing before the broken fireplace. "They want you gone. They'll do anything to scare you away. This isn't a curse. It's hostility." Grace wanted to believe him. I could see it in her desperate nods, the way she clutched his words like a lifeline. But later, when we were alone, she confessed, "No one from town would dare climb that cliff in a storm." "You know it. I know it." And she was right. The second scream came from Eleanor. She arrived in Ravenwood unannounced, her carriage pulling up to the Hollow House as though she intended to storm its gates. She confronted Grace in front of me, her fury unchecked. "You will leave this place," she demanded, her voice echoing through the ruined foyer. "If you don't, it will kill you, just like it killed the Morgans." Grace froze. "The Morgans?" Eleanor's lips curled. "The family who owned this house before. Do you think their deaths were an accident? Husband, wife, children, all gone in a single night. No explanation, no survivors. The house took them, and it will take you too." Grace trembled, her hand reaching for mine. I squeezed it, my voice steady even as something cold slithered down my spine. "Stories, that's all they are. Stories to scare children." But Eleanor's eyes, sharp, pitiless, bored into mine. "You know it isn't just stories. I see it in your face. The house has already claimed you." Her words clung to me like wet clothes, heavy and inescapable. The third scream came in blood again. It was late evening when Grace and I returned from town to find a stray dog lying at the gates, its body broken, eyes wide with terror even in death. Grace cried out, rushing to its side, but there was nothing to be done. The animal's neck was twisted unnaturally, as though something had snapped it clean. Pinned to its body was a note. "She will be next." Grace collapsed into sobs, and I held her, rage burning hotter than fear. Who had done this? The townsfolk? Eleanor? Or was it something else? Something darker, less human? That night, Grace locked every window, bolted every door, but sleep still evaded her. She tossed, murmuring in half-dreams, until finally she whispered, "I can't breathe here, Ethan. It's like the night never ends." I stroked her hair, whispering lies of comfort, but deep inside I knew she wasn't wrong. The hollow house did not know day. Its windows always seemed shadowed, its halls always dim. Even when sunlight spilled across the cliffs, the house remained steeped in twilight, as though dawn itself refused to enter. The fourth scream came not from outside, but from Grace herself. She had taken to painting the house, filling canvas after canvas with its twisted silhouette. At first, the paintings were beautiful, romantic ruins against stormy skies, but soon they grew darker. In one, the house bled into the sea, its walls dripping like tar. In another, faces appeared in its windows, faces neither of us recognized. One evening, she showed me her latest piece. The hollow house loomed, but its windows were filled with eyes, hundreds of them staring outward, staring at us. "I didn't paint those," she whispered. "I swear I didn't." Her hands shook as though she had been possessed while creating it. I tried to laugh it off, but unease gnawed at me. Because when I looked at the painting, the eyes seemed familiar. Not strangers, not ghosts. Mine. The fifth scream came from Martha Green. She appeared once more, her presence as inevitable as the tide. She stood at the base of the cliff as we returned from town, her thin frame silhouetted against the dying light. "Do you hear them yet?" she asked Grace, her voice like rust on iron. "The cries at night? The whispers in the halls? That house has many mouths, child, and it will feed on you until you're nothing but another voice in the dark." Grace snapped, her patience finally breaking. "Leave us alone. You don't know what you're talking about." But Martha's eyes flicked to me again, piercing. "Oh, he knows. He's already listening." I dragged Grace away, furious, but the words echoed louder than thunder. Because deep down, I did know. I had been listening all along, and the hollow house had been whispering back. Warnings rarely come in words alone. Sometimes they manifest in shadows, in accidents, in moments too precise to be coincidence. And by the third month in the hollow house, those warnings were everywhere. It began with the mirrors. Grace had insisted on cleaning one of the tall, ornate mirrors left behind by the Morgans, the family Eleanor swore had been swallowed whole. The mirror was cracked but still serviceable, its gilded frame blackened by years of neglect. Grace polished the glass until it gleamed, proud of her work. But that night, when she passed it on the way to bed, she screamed. I came running to find her staring at her reflection, or rather not her reflection. The face staring back had her features, yes, but distorted. Eyes too dark, mouth curled in silent despair, skin gray as ash. And behind that twisted version of her stood a shadowed figure, tall and formless. "It was there," she sobbed, clutching me. "It was standing right behind me." When I looked, there was nothing, just her pale face and my own hollow-eyed reflection. "Stress," I told her. "It's just your imagination." But as I led her away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure she saw hadn't vanished at all. It had simply stepped back into the shadows, waiting. The second sign came from the walls themselves. Grace was painting in the parlor when she noticed the wallpaper peeling in long strips. She pulled one piece away and screamed again. Scrawled beneath, etched into the plaster, were words that made the blood in my veins turn cold. The night belongs to us. Not me. Not her. Us. Grace dropped her brush, trembling. Who wrote that? I didn't answer, because the truth gnawed at me. The handwriting was faintly familiar, jagged, desperate, like my own during sleepless nights. The third warning was Nathaniel. He returned from New York after Eleanor begged him to intervene again. He stormed into the house, his polished shoes crunching on broken tiles, his disgust plain. "This is insanity," he told Grace. "Look at this place, it's falling apart, and look at you. You're pale, you're shaking. You were never meant for this life." Grace argued, her voice fierce but trembling. "You don't understand, this is mine, ours, I'm not going back." Nathaniel's gaze slid to me, sharp as a blade. "And you? What are you getting out of this, Cole? Her money? Her name? Or just the thrill of dragging her down with you?" I wanted to hit him. Instead, I smiled coldly. Maybe I just love the house. Grace gasped at my words, but Nathaniel didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Then it will love you back, right into the grave." He left after that, shaking his head. But his words hung in the air like smoke. The fourth warning came in whispers. Grace began waking at night, sitting bolt upright in bed, her eyes wide, her ears straining. "Do you hear it?" she'd whisper. I listened, and at first there was only silence, but then faint, almost too faint to catch. Voices, murmurs threading through the air like wind, rising and falling like breath. I couldn't make out words, but Grace swore she could. "They're saying my name," she whispered one night, clutching my arm until her nails drew blood. "They're calling me." I held her, muttering comforts I didn't believe, because I had begun to hear them too. The fifth warning was blood again, but this time it wasn't an animal. A worker from town, one of the few brave enough to return after Tommy's fall, came to patch the roof. He slipped, or was pushed, and plummeted 3 stories onto the stone path below. His skull cracked like porcelain, his blood staining the stones in dark rivers. Grace collapsed into sobs as they carried him away, and the townsfolk muttered louder than ever. "The house doesn't want them," one woman whispered. It never wanted anyone. That night, Eleanor came to us once more, her fury stripped away, replaced by desperation. "Grace, please," she begged, clutching her niece's hands. "Come home before it's too late." Grace shook her head, her eyes hollow. "This is home." Eleanor turned to me then, her gaze fierce. "You'll kill her. You're too blind to see it, but I'm not. You'll kill her, Ethan Cole, and when you do, the house will kill you too." I said nothing, because for the first time I wondered if she was right. But still I couldn't let go. The hollow house had its claws in me, and every warning, every accident, every whisper only pulled me deeper. By the time the last warning came, even Grace had stopped pretending she didn't believe them. Her laughter, once quick and defiant, was now a brittle thing, breaking too easily. She painted less, spoke less, and when she did, her words carried a tremor that frightened me more than her silence. The hollow house was taking her, slowly, methodically, piece by piece. It began with her dreams. At first they were small things, restless nights, muttered words I couldn't understand, but soon she began screaming in her sleep, thrashing against me as though fighting invisible hands. "They're here," she sobbed when I shook her awake. "They're in the room, Ethan. I saw them standing over me." I tried to soothe her, but every night the terror grew worse. And when I pressed her for details, she finally whispered, "It wasn't strangers I saw. It was you." Her words chilled me more than any whisper in the walls ever had. The house was clever. It knew how to wedge itself between us, how to poison trust, how to twist love into suspicion. The second sign came with the diary. Grace found it in a hidden drawer in the library desk, its leather cracked with age. The pages belonged to Margaret Morgan, the the wife of the man who had once owned the house. The entries began simply enough: plans for renovations, notes on dinners, affection for her children. But then the tone shifted. The night never ends here. He doesn't see it, but I do. The shadows move when no one else is looking. I hear whispers in the walls. They call my name. They call the children too. I begged him to leave, but he won't. He loves the house more than he loves us. I fear the house will keep him. I fear it already has. The final entry was a single sentence, scrawled in a trembling hand. We will not see the morning. Grace dropped the diary as though it had burned her. Don't you see? She cried. It's happening again, just like before. I tried to dismiss it, to tell her it was the ramblings of a frightened woman. But the truth was, the words cut too close. They sounded like a prophecy repeating itself. The third sign came not in writing or dreams, but in sound. It was late one evening, the house groaning with the weight of a storm, when I heard it clearly for the first time. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the second floor. Grace clutched my arm, her eyes wide. No one's up there. We climbed the stairs together, the boards creaking beneath us, the lantern light trembling in my hands. The footsteps continued, retreating just ahead of us, leading us down the hallway to the master bedroom. The door stood ajar. Inside, the air was icy, our breath visible in the flickering light. The room was empty, but on the wall, etched into the plaster above the bed, were new words. She will die here. Grace collapsed, sobbing. I pulled her into my arms, whispering, "It's not real, it's not real." But even as I held her, I felt it, the truth humming in the walls and the floorboards, in my own bones. The fourth warning was blood again. This time it was Grace herself. She was carrying tea from the kitchen when she stumbled, the tray clattering to the floor. When I rushed to her, I saw her hand cut deep across the palm, though the broken china had fallen far from her. "I didn't trip," she gasped. "Something pushed me." We wrapped the wound, but it refused to close properly, seeping through bandages as though the house itself wanted her blood. That night, Eleanor came once more, her face haggard, her eyes wild. She had abandoned dignity, arriving without her usual poise. "Please," she begged Grace, clutching her niece's wounded hand. "Please leave this place before it kills you." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I can't. I won't. It's mine. It's ours." Eleanor turned to me then, her voice shaking with fury and grief. "You'll be the death of her, Ethan Cole. And when she's gone, you'll have nothing but this cursed night for company." I wanted to shout, to deny it, but the words tangled in my throat, because part of me knew, part of me had always known, that she was right. The final warning came in silence. For days, the whispers stopped, the footsteps ceased. The house fell quiet, as though holding its breath. Grace relaxed slightly, convinced the worst was over, that maybe the house had accepted us. But silence is the loudest warning of all, because silence is only the pause before the storm. And when the storm came, it would take everything. The Hollow House was ours in name, but in truth it belonged to its shadows. By the time autumn deepened into winter, it was impossible to deny. The house lived, breathed, and fed on us. It began with the nights. Even when the sun rose over Ravenwood, spilling its pale light across the cliffs, inside the Hollow House it felt as though dawn never fully arrived. Curtains billowed as if moved by unseen hands. Hallways remained steeped in half-dark, and the corners of rooms seemed to stretch deeper than the walls should allow. Grace, who once filled the silence with laughter and plans, now moved through the house as though she were already a ghost. She grew thinner, paler, her eyes ringed with sleepless nights. She painted less, and when she did, her canvases turned darker. Figures in the halls, shapes crouching in the corners, doors that led nowhere. I should have been frightened, but instead I was fascinated. The house was revealing itself to us, testing us, and I wanted to see how far it would go. One evening we invited a handful of locals for dinner in a desperate attempt to bridge the gap between us and the town. Only 3 came: Harold Pike, the old fisherman who once warned me; Sarah Whitman, a widow who had lost 2 sons to the sea; and Jonas Bell, the town carpenter. We laid out what little food we could afford, lit candles to drive back the gloom, and tried to pretend the hollow house was just another home. But the air grew heavier with each passing hour. Halfway through the meal, Sarah dropped her spoon with a clatter. Her face had gone white as she stared at the wall behind me. "What is it?" Grace asked quickly. "There," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "A man, standing in the corner." I turned. There was nothing but shadow. Harold cursed, pushing his chair back. "I told you the house doesn't want you here. It doesn't want any of us here." The evening ended in chaos, our guests fleeing into the night. Grace sobbed as the door slammed shut behind them. "We'll never belong here, never." I held her, murmuring comforts, but inside me a strange pride swelled. Because they were wrong. The house did want someone here. It wanted me. Days later, another presence arrived, not from the town, but from outside it. Her name was Vanessa Price. She came under the guise of a traveler, a woman of striking beauty and poise who claimed she was passing through Ravenwood on her way north. But from the moment I saw her, I knew she was more than chance. Her dark hair framed a face that seemed carved for temptation, her smile sharp as broken glass. When she asked for directions at the cafe, her eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. "You're the man who lives in the hollow house, aren't you?" she said, her tone half mocking, half admiring. "Yes," I answered. She tilted her head. "Then you're braver than most, or more foolish." I should have walked away. I should have ignored the spark that flared in me when she spoke. But I didn't, because there was something in Vanessa that mirrored my own darkness, a hunger I recognized instantly. Grace met her days later by accident and was charmed at once. Vanessa had that effect. She could slip into any circle, wear any mask. She spoke of art and travel, and Grace, starved for friendship, welcomed her. But when Vanessa's eyes met mine over Grace's shoulder, I felt the truth. She wasn't here for Grace. She was here for me. The Hollow House welcomed her too. That same week, Grace fell ill. At first it was fainting spells, sudden collapses that left her gasping for air. Then came the fevers, the cold sweats, the nights where she whimpered in her sleep. The doctor from town, an old man named Dr. Finch, examined her and muttered something about exhaustion, nerves, the sea air. But his eyes betrayed him. He didn't believe his own diagnosis. "She needs rest," he said, packing his bag. "And she needs to leave this house." Grace refused. "This is my home. I'm not leaving." Dr. Finch shook his head but said no more. That night, Grace lay in bed pale as death, her hand cold in mine. Vanessa's words echoed from earlier that day when she had found me alone in the hall. "Fragile things break easily," she had murmured, her lips dangerously close to my ear. "Sometimes you have to let them break if you want to build something stronger." Her voice was silk and venom, and it slid into the cracks of my heart where doubt already lived. For the first time, I wondered what life in the Hollow House might be like without Grace, and the thought didn't horrify me, it thrilled me. The Hollow House seemed to grow darker with Grace's decline. It was as though the walls themselves drank her strength, pulling color from her cheeks and fire from her eyes. Every cough echoed through the halls like a death knell, every fevered whisper a reminder that she was slipping further from the woman who once defied her father, her aunt, and the whole town. I tried to play the doting lover, sitting at her bedside, spooning broth into her trembling hands, whispering promises of recovery. But the truth was, I was already drifting away from her. My eyes wandered to Vanessa, and Vanessa's eyes never strayed from me. She had become a constant presence in the house. At first, she came under the pretense of checking in on Grace, offering company and comfort. Grace, too weak and too trusting, welcomed her. Vanessa would sit by the bed, brushing Grace's hair back from her damp forehead, murmuring words of encouragement. To anyone else, it might have looked like friendship, but I knew better. I saw the glint in her eyes every time Grace closed hers. Late at night, when Grace slept, Vanessa and I lingered in the hallways. "She's fading," Vanessa said one evening, her voice low, her breath hot against my ear. "The house is taking her, but it doesn't have to take you." Her words sank into me like poison disguised as honey. "You don't understand," I muttered, though even I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. "She loves this house." Vanessa smiled, a cruel curve of lips. "No, you love this house. She only loves you. And that's her mistake." I should have walked away. I should have returned to Grace's bedside. But instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn to the fire in Vanessa's gaze, to the freedom in her boldness. It was the beginning of betrayal, though I told myself it was inevitability. Meanwhile, the townsfolk's warnings grew louder. Harold Pike, the old fisherman, cornered me at the docks. His eyes were wild, his voice desperate. "You have to leave, boy. That house won't stop until it has her. Or you, or both. Get her out before it's too late." I shook my head. "We're not leaving." Harold spat into the sea. "Then she'll die. Mark me. She'll die, and you'll be next." Even Nathaniel returned, summoned by Eleanor's frantic letters. He stormed into the hollow house, his fury barely contained. "Look at her," he shouted, pointing at Grace, frail and pale in her bed. "She's wasting away in this cursed place, and you, what are you doing? Watching her die?" Grace tried to defend me, her voice weak but resolute. "He's with me. He loves me." Nathaniel's glare burned into me. "Does he? Or does he love the house more?" His words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. The shadows in Ravenwood thickened too. Strange things began happening beyond the house. Fishermen reported voices on the water, calling their names in the fog. Sarah Whitman claimed she saw lights moving in the hollow house windows, though she swore Grace and I had been in town that evening. Children refused to walk past the cliffs, swearing they heard screaming carried on the wind. And Grace began speaking in her sleep. At first it was murmurs, but soon the words grew clearer, more terrifying. "They're coming for me," she whispered one night, her voice not her own. "They're already here, in the walls." In the night, I held her, my heart pounding, but all I could think of was Vanessa's words. "She's fading. The house is taking her, but it doesn't have to take you." The turning point came one evening when Grace tried to paint again. She set up her easel in the parlor, her hands trembling as she dipped the brush. I watched as she began to sketch the outline of the hollow house. But halfway through, her hand seized, dragging the brush violently across the canvas. The painting that emerged was grotesque, the house twisted, alive, its windows like gaping mouths, its walls bleeding into the sea. And in the foreground, two figures stood, one unmistakably Grace, the other unmistakably me. But in the painting, my arm wasn't around her, it was around Vanessa. Grace dropped the brush, her eyes wide with horror. "I didn't paint that, I swear." "Ethan, I didn't." Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her face. "It's the house. It's showing me what's coming." I pulled her close, whispering comforts, but my hands shook, because the painting hadn't shocked me the way it should have. It had thrilled me. That night I found myself in the library with Vanessa, the fire casting flickering shadows across her face. She leaned close, her lips brushing my ear. "You know it's true," she whispered. "The house wants her gone, it wants us. Don't fight it, let it happen." And when her lips met mine, I didn't resist. Grace slept upstairs, feverish and frail, while I kissed Vanessa in the shadows of the hollow house. And for the first time, I realized the truth I had been denying all along. I wanted Grace gone. I wanted the house. And with Vanessa, I could finally have both. Grace's illness grew heavier with every passing day, and with it, so did the shadows inside the hollow house. The halls seemed to breathe differently now, inhaling with her shallow gasps, exhaling with her sighs of pain. The air clung damp and heavy, as if the walls themselves were waiting for her final breath. I played the part of the concerned husband well. I brought water to her trembling lips, cooled her fevered forehead with cloths, whispered reassurances that she would recover. But behind my tender gestures lay another truth. I was already imagining the silence that would follow her death. Vanessa fed that imagination. She had a way of appearing exactly when Grace's coughing fits grew worse, when her skin burned hot as fire or cold as stone. She would rest her hand lightly on my arm, her lips curved in sympathy, and murmur, "She doesn't have long. You should prepare yourself." But her eyes, those dark, knowing eyes, told me I was preparing for something else entirely. One evening, as rain hammered the windows and the sea screamed against the cliffs, Vanessa and I found ourselves alone in the parlor. Grace was upstairs, finally asleep after hours of fever and delirium. "She's slipping," Vanessa whispered, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass of wine. "Every day she grows weaker. The house is taking her." I stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in my eyes. "And if it doesn't?" Vanessa leaned closer, her breath warm against my neck. "Then you help it." The words hung between us, more dangerous than any whisper from the walls. "You're saying—" "I'm saying," she interrupted softly, "that you want this house more than you want her. You've always wanted it. I can see it in your eyes, I can feel it. Don't lie to yourself, Ethan. She's the last obstacle standing in your way." Her hand slid into mine, her fingers cool, steady. "Let her go." My heart thundered in my chest. Some part of me wanted to recoil, to deny it, to insist that I loved Grace, that I could never harm her. But another part, darker, truer, welcomed Vanessa's words like a confession I had been waiting to make. The next morning, Grace awoke weaker than ever. She could barely sit up without help. Her once bright eyes were sunken, her voice a faint whisper. "Promise me," she said, clutching my hand. "Promise me you won't let the house win." I kissed her hand, my voice breaking. "I promise." But it was a promise I had no intention of keeping. That same day, Nathaniel arrived again, summoned by Eleanor. His fury shook the rafters. "Look at her," he thundered, pointing at Grace's frail form. "She's dying, and you sit here pretending everything is fine. This house is killing her, and you're too blind or too selfish to see it." Grace tried to defend me, but Nathaniel's rage burned hotter. He turned to me, his face inches from mine. "If she dies, Cole, it'll be on your hands, and I swear I'll see you pay for it." I said nothing. I didn't need to, because his words no longer struck fear in me. They struck inevitability. That night, Vanessa and I met again in the library, the firelight dancing on her face. "It's time," she whispered, her lips brushing mine. "End it. End her." The hollow house seemed to echo her words. The walls creaked, the floor groaned, the air thickened as though in approval. I lay awake beside Grace that night, listening to her shallow breathing, her weak coughs. My hand hovered above the glass of water at her bedside, the vial of powder Vanessa had given me heavy in my pocket. Just a pinch, she had said. Just enough each night. She'll fade naturally. No one will suspect. Grace stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled faintly, weakly. "Ethan," she whispered, "and stay with me. Don't leave me." "I'm right here," I said, brushing her hair back from her damp forehead. And I was. I was there as I slipped the powder into her drink. I was there as she sipped it, trusting me completely. I was there as she closed her eyes again, murmuring my name. I was there as the hollow house welcomed her into its night. For the first time, I felt peace. Not guilt, not sorrow. Peace, because the house was mine now. Truly mine. Grace lingered for days after I began dosing her, the hollow house stretching each hour like a string about to snap. She grew weaker, slipping in and out of fevered dreams, whispering fragments of words that made my blood run cold. Sometimes she called my name. Sometimes she cried for her mother. And sometimes she muttered things no one should have known. "They're waiting for you," she gasped one night, clutching at the sheets. "In the walls, in the dark. You think you're free, but you're theirs too." Her voice was thin, cracked with fever, but her eyes were sharp, too sharp. For a moment I almost believed she could see straight through me, down to the black seed of betrayal already blooming in my chest. I hushed her, pressed the cup to her lips, watched her drink, watched her trust me, and every sip drew her closer to the night that would never end. Eleanor came often during those days, her visits filled with desperation. She begged, she pleaded, she wept at Grace's bedside. "Come with me," she urged. "Leave this place before it swallows you whole. I'll take care of you. I'll take you anywhere you want to go." Grace only smiled faintly, her fingers brushing Eleanor's hand. "I chose this. I wanted this, and I don't regret it." Eleanor's eyes burned with grief and fury as she turned on me. "You're letting her die, you—" But she stopped, as though some unspoken realization had struck her. Her eyes narrowed. "Or maybe you're helping it." I forced outrage into my voice, denied it with all the passion I could feign. But her suspicion lingered like smoke in the air, refusing to clear. When she left that evening, I knew she would return with sharper accusations, but by then it would be too late. Vanessa was my shadow, always close, always waiting. She moved through the hollow house as if it belonged to her already, her laughter echoing through its halls, her perfume lingering long after she left a room. At night, when Grace's breathing rasped weakly in the upstairs bedroom, Vanessa's lips found mine in the library. "It's almost over," she murmured, her hand resting over my heart. "Soon she'll be gone, and then the house will be ours." The word "ours" filled me with a hunger stronger than any guilt could silence. And the end came quietly. One evening, as the wind screamed over the cliffs and the hollow house shuddered against the storm, Grace slipped away. Her final breath was barely a sigh, her hand trembling in mine before falling still. Her eyes, once so full of life, now stared blankly at the ceiling, reflecting the flickering candlelight one last time. I sat there, watching the life drain from her, waiting for grief, for horror, for guilt. But none came. Instead, a strange exhilaration coursed through me, a sense of release. The night had claimed her, yes. But in doing so, it had set me free. For the funeral was small, attended only by Eleanor, Nathaniel, and a scattering of townsfolk who whispered curses under their breath. Eleanor wept openly, clinging to the coffin as though she could pull Grace back from the grave. Nathaniel stood rigid, his fury barely contained, his eyes burning into me as though he could see the poison on my hands. When the coffin was lowered into the earth, the sky broke open, rain pouring down as though the heavens themselves mourned her. But I did not weep. I only watched, silent, the hollow house rising dark against the horizon behind us. It was mine now, mine and Vanessa's. That night the house celebrated. At least that's what it felt like. The walls seemed to hum, the floorboards vibrated beneath my feet. The windows rattled with something more than the storm outside. Vanessa and I stood in the parlor, glasses of wine in our hands, the fire roaring in the hearth. "To us," she whispered, clinking her glass against mine. "To us," I echoed. She smiled, her lips red as blood, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "The night has finally ended." But even as she said it, I knew she was wrong. The night had only just begun. Because as the firelight flickered, I thought I saw a figure in the corner of the room. Pale, thin, her hair damp with fever sweat, her eyes burning with betrayal. Grace, watching, waiting. And in that moment I understood the terrible truth. The hollow house did not belong to me. I belonged to it. Ere the shadows of Ravenwood closed in, and the night stretched on, endless and unbroken, and I knew, no matter how far I tried to run, no matter how much I tried to forget, this was a night that would never end. The funeral should have been an ending, a closing of doors, a sealing of chapters, a farewell to the woman whose laughter once filled the hollow house. Yet when the coffin vanished beneath the earth, and the mourners scattered back into the rain, I felt no finality. Only the tightening of chains I had not realized were already around me. Ravenwood did not forgive. It did not forget. And neither did the house. In the days after Grace's burial, I found myself wandering its halls with a strange restlessness. The rooms no longer felt like spaces we had shared, but like stages awaiting new performances. Curtains swayed in unseen breezes, staircases groaned with footsteps that were not mine, and the mirrors reflected things that lingered a fraction too long. Vanessa tried to fill the silence with her laughter, her presence. She was bold now, no longer sneaking glances over Grace's shoulder, no longer whispering behind closed doors. She moved through the hollow house as if it were hers by right, rearranging furniture, lighting candles in rooms long abandoned, humming tunes as though the walls themselves were listening. "It's ours now," she said one evening as she stood at the window gazing out at the storm-slashed cliffs. "Yours and mine. The way it was, always meant to be." I nodded because what else could I do? She had been the architect of my freedom, the voice that pushed me toward what I secretly desired. Yet in her triumph I saw something unsettling. A hunger deeper than mine, sharper, colder. Sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, I caught her staring at the walls with a reverence that chilled me. As if she too heard the house whispering. As if she were listening more closely than I ever dared. As the town grew colder too. People stopped speaking to me when I walked past. Conversations cut off mid-sentence, eyes turned away. Children pulled behind their mothers' skirts. The whispers followed me everywhere. Murderer, curse-bringer, devil's hand. Nathaniel made no effort to hide his contempt. He confronted me on the street one morning, his voice carrying for all to hear. "You killed her," he spat, his face pale with fury. "Maybe not with your hands, but with your heart. You let that house devour her while you stood by and watched." I forced a mask of calm, though his words struck deeper than I would admit. "Grief makes men say cruel things," I replied softly. "Grief makes men see the truth," he shot back, his eyes burning into mine. "And I see you, Ethan. One day the rest of them will too." The crowd that had gathered muttered in agreement, their eyes cold as stone. For the first time I felt the weight of suspicion pressing down on me, heavier than the sea itself. But suspicion was not my greatest torment. It was the nights. The nights had become unbearable. I would lie beside Vanessa, her body warm against mine, and listen to the house. The creaking floors, the sighing walls, the distant echo of voices that had no source. Sometimes in the dead of night I heard Grace, her whisper at my ear, her laughter down the hall, her sobs beneath the floorboards. I would rise, my heart pounding, and search the rooms one by one, certain I would find her there, waiting, accusing, watching. But the rooms were always empty, always dark, always shifting as though the house rearranged itself behind my back. Vanessa claimed she heard nothing. She would smirk as I returned, trembling and wild-eyed, and murmur, "You're letting guilt invent ghosts." But her smirk lingered too long, her eyes too bright. I began to wonder if she truly heard nothing, or if she simply welcomed what she heard. It was Eleanor who returned first, bringing with her the storm I had tried to ignore. She came to the Hollow House one evening, her cloak dripping rain, her eyes sharp as blades. She looked around the parlor as though the walls themselves offended her. "You've already replaced her," she said coldly, her gaze flicking to Vanessa, who lounged in Grace's chair with a glass of wine. Vanessa only smiled, unbothered. "The house was too large for one, now it's alive again." Eleanor's face twisted with disgust. "You're poison, both of you." And if Grace could see what's become of her home— "She can see," I interrupted before I could stop myself. The words slipped out like venom, bitter and raw. "She sees everything." Eleanor's eyes widened, horror dawning on her face. "You hear her, don't you?" I said nothing. That was answer enough. "You think you've won," she whispered, stepping closer, her finger trembling as she pointed at me. "But this house won't save you, it will consume you, just like it consumed her. And when it does, I'll be here to watch." She stormed out, the door slamming behind her, her words lingering like smoke. After she left, Vanessa laughed softly. "She thinks she's warning you, but she's only telling the truth." I turned to her, my skin crawling. "What do you mean?" She met my gaze, her smile sharp as broken glass. "The house doesn't consume those it doesn't want. It chose you, Ethan, just as it chose me. Grace was never meant to survive here, but we—" Her hand brushed mine, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We are the night it was waiting for." And though her words should have terrified me, they only thrilled me. Because deep down, I knew she was right. The nights grew heavier after Eleanor's visit. Her warnings haunted me, repeating in my head like the echoes that traveled the Hollow House's endless corridors. "This house won't save you. It will consume you." At first I dismissed her words as grief-stricken madness, but as days passed, her prophecy began to carve itself into the walls around me. I started noticing things, small, subtle at first. A door left ajar, though I swore I had closed it. A candle snuffed out, though no draft touched the air. Footsteps above us when no one else was in the house. And always, the whispers. Sometimes they were Grace's. Sometimes they were others, men and women I had never met, voices ancient and cracked, voices young and desperate. They murmured through the walls, through the floors, through the very bones of the Hollow House. Vanessa remained untouched. She glided through the mansion as if the shadows bent around her, never once shivering at the sounds that gnawed at my sanity. "You're unraveling," she teased one evening as I flinched at the creak of the stairs behind me. "The house loves you, Ethan. Don't mistake its voice for cruelty." But her smile unsettled me. It was too calm, too knowing. One night, as the wind battered the cliffs and the ocean howled like a beast, I dreamt of Grace. She stood in the parlor wearing the dress she'd been buried in, her face pale, her lips blue, her eyes blazing with fire that pierced through the shadows. "You think you're free," she whispered, "but you're mine. The night never ends, Ethan. Not for you." I woke drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around me. Vanessa slept soundly beside me, her breathing deep and even. But when I turned toward the mirror across the room, I saw Grace's reflection staring back at me. I screamed. By the time Vanessa stirred, the reflection was gone. The town's hostility sharpened. Rumors grew teeth. The baker refused to sell me bread. Children threw stones when I passed. Men muttered curses under their breath, louder each time I crossed their path. And Nathaniel, he became my shadow. I saw him on the cliffs in the marketplace outside the hollow house at night. His eyes never left me, filled with suspicion and a growing certainty that would one day ignite into violence. Vanessa urged me not to care. "They fear you," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "Let them. Fear is power. Fear means they know you belong to something greater than them." But her words did nothing to soothe me, because fear had already crept into my own heart. And the descent truly began the night I found the journal. It was tucked into a hidden compartment in the library behind rows of decaying books. Bound in leather, its pages brittle with age, the handwriting scrawled and frantic. It belonged to Jonathan Hollow, the original owner of the mansion. His entries spoke of whispers in the night, of shadows that moved when no one watched, of dreams that bled into reality. He wrote of his wife wasting away within the house, of townsfolk who claimed the cliffs demanded sacrifices. One entry near the end chilled me to my core. "The house does not belong to us, we belong to it. It chooses, it consumes, and it never lets go." I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling. The words were mine, written a century before I breathed them. That night I confronted Vanessa. "You knew," I accused, slamming the journal onto the table. "You knew what this place was." Her eyes flicked to the book, then back to me, calm as ever. "Of course I knew, and so did you. You just didn't want to admit it." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "Grace died here. Hollow's wife died here. God knows how many others, and we're next." Her laughter was soft, mocking. "Next? No, Ethan. We're chosen. The others were weak. They couldn't give themselves to the house, but we can. That's why it called us here." Her words rattled in my bones. A part of me wanted to run. Far from the cliffs, far from Ravenwood, far from Vanessa. But another part, darker and more powerful, clung to her every syllable. Because deep down, I had always known she was right. And the dreams worsened. Grace appeared every night now, her voice sharper, her presence stronger. Sometimes she screamed, sometimes she wept, sometimes she simply stared at me with hollow eyes that pierced straight through my soul. And the house began to change. Doors opened to rooms that had never existed before. Hallways stretched longer than they should. Windows revealed landscapes that weren't Ravenwood. Forests, deserts, places I had never seen. The Hollow House was alive, and it was no longer pretending otherwise. Vanessa reveled in it. She danced through the shifting halls, laughing, whispering to the walls as though they answered her. And maybe they did. But for me, the descent was not joy. It was terror. Because every time I closed my eyes, I wondered if I would wake again, or if the night had already claimed me. The line between dream and waking began to blur. I no longer trusted the morning light when it crept into the Hollow House, because sometimes I caught the sun flickering, like a candle about to be snuffed out. Some days I swore I never left the night at all. I tried to escape once. It was after a particularly brutal dream. Grace's face twisted in agony, her voice shrieking through the halls. You don't belong to yourself anymore. You belong to me. I packed a bag before dawn, my hands shaking, sweat slick on my brow. Vanessa lay sleeping in the bed, a faint smile on her lips, as if she already knew what I intended. I made it as far as the iron gates at the end of the gravel path. The air outside was heavy, suffocating but still freer than the darkness of the house. I gripped the gate, pulled it open, and found myself staring at the front doors of the hollow house again. The path twisted back on itself, looping me into the jaws of the very place I'd tried to escape. I tried again the next morning, and again the day after that. Each attempt ended the same way. No matter which direction I walked, no matter how far I ran, I always returned to those blackened doors, waiting for me like the grin of a predator. There was no leaving. The realization broke something inside me. Vanessa, however, thrived. You see, she purred, her arms slipping around me one evening as the firelight licked the parlor walls. There's no world outside this one. Ravenwood doesn't matter, the townsfolk don't matter, Grace doesn't matter, only the house, only us. Her lips brushed my ear and the words sank deeper than they should have. She believed them, every syllable, and the worst part was that some part of me did too. The hollow house grew more hostile. It didn't just whisper anymore, it showed me things. One evening as I passed the long gallery lined with ancestral portraits, I noticed something strange. The faces in the paintings shifted. Grace's hollow eyes stared back at me from canvases painted long before her birth. The hollow patriarch's mouth curved into a grin that hadn't been there before. A child in the corner of one frame raised a hand and waved. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering, but when I blinked, the portraits were still again. Another night as I descended the staircase, the banister felt warm beneath my palm, like skin. I ripped my hand away, my stomach churning. The house was no longer content to whisper. It wanted to touch me. I stopped sleeping, or rather, sleep stopped being mine. The moment I closed my eyes, the house claimed me, dragging me into endless hallways, doors that opened to black voids, rooms filled with faceless figures whispering my name. Grace always waited at the end of these dreams. Her form grew clearer each time, first pale and shadowy, then solid, then almost alive. You think you chose this, she whispered one night, her face inches from mine. But you were chosen long before me, long before us all. The night doesn't end, Ethan, it never ends. When I woke, I found bruises on my arms shaped like fingers. I knew they were hers. Eleanor returned, desperate, broken. She banged on the hollow house's doors until I opened them. Rain plastered her hair to her face, her eyes red from crying. Leave this place, she begged, grabbing my sleeve. It's killing you, can't you see? It's already killed her. Don't let it take you too. Behind me, Vanessa's laughter rang out, cruel and sharp. He can't leave, she said, stepping into the doorway, her eyes glittering. The house has him, just like it has me. Eleanor recoiled, her face twisted with horror. You're both mad. This place is poison. It's not love, it's a coffin. She turned to me, her voice breaking. Ethan, please, come with me before it's too late. Her hand trembled in mine, her eyes pleading. For a moment I wanted to go. God help me, I wanted to. But when I looked back at Vanessa, standing in the glow of the firelight, I felt the chains tighten around my soul. I can't, I whispered. Eleanor's face crumpled, her sobs swallowed by the storm as she ran into the night. I never saw her again. Nathaniel was next. He came not with pleas, but with fury. He stormed into the house one afternoon, shoving past me, his fists clenched. You killed her, he snarled, and you'll answer for it. I tried to defend myself, tried to lie, but the words felt hollow even to me. Nathaniel grabbed my collar, shaking me. She deserved better than you, and one day everyone will know what you did. Before I could respond, the house intervened. The chandelier above us groaned and snapped free, crashing down inches from where Nathaniel stood. Shards of glass and twisted metal scattered across the floor. He froze, his rage twisting into terror. His eyes darted around the room, and for the first time he seemed to understand. "This place," he whispered. "It's alive." He backed toward the door, never taking his eyes off me. "It'll get you too, Cole, and when it does, I'll be glad." He fled, and I was left alone with the echo of his words. But I already knew the truth. The house had me. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow belonged to me as much as I belonged to it. My guilt, my sins, my desires, they fed it, and in return it wrapped itself tighter around my soul. And the worst part, I no longer wanted to fight it, because in the hollow house even damnation felt like home. So the hollow house no longer hid its nature. It pulsed with life, a grotesque heartbeat echoing through its beams and walls, a rhythm that matched my own. I began to sense it breathing in the silence, drawing air through the cracks, exhaling into my lungs until I could not tell where it ended and I began. Vanessa thrived in this world of shadows. She drifted through the halls like a queen in her court, whispering to the walls, laughing when they whispered back. Sometimes I heard her murmuring to rooms I dared not enter, her words low and intimate, as though she and the house were lovers. And I became her willing subject. The guilt that once tore at me dulled under the weight of something heavier. Ownership. Not of the house, but by it. The more I resisted, the tighter its grasp grew. The more I surrendered, the easier it became to breathe. But even surrender has its price. The first real sign came one night as I sat in the study staring into the flames. I reached for my glass of wine and froze. A hand, pale and skeletal, rested on the arm of my chair. It wasn't Vanessa's. I turned slowly. Grace sat beside me. Not the fevered, fragile woman I had watched waste away, but something else. Her flesh sagged, her eyes hollow, her lips pulled back in a grim smile that revealed blackened teeth. "You thought you buried me," she whispered, her voice a rasp that came from everywhere at once. "But the night doesn't end, Ethan. It never ends." The glass shattered from my hand. When I blinked, the chair was empty. But the impression of her hand burned on the wood, charred black into the armrest. I began to see her everywhere, in the mirror above the mantel, in the window's reflection when I passed, in the shadows that clung too long at the edge of candlelight. She was part of the house now, or perhaps she had always been, and she wanted me to join her. Nathaniel returned once more, though I sensed it would be the last time. He didn't come with fury this time. He came with a lantern and a Bible clutched in his hands, his eyes fever bright. "This place is cursed," he declared as he stormed into the parlor. "I can feel it in my bones, and I'll burn it down before I let it take another soul." Vanessa laughed from the staircase, her silhouette framed by the flickering light. "You can't burn the night, Nathaniel. It burns you." He turned on her, his rage flaring. "You're the witch who led her here. You're the devil's bride." I stepped between them, my voice breaking. "Nathaniel, leave. You don't understand." But he shoved me aside, lifting the lantern high. "I'll end this." Before he could act, the house answered. The floor split beneath him, a jagged crack tearing through the wood. He screamed as the lantern fell, flames licking across the rug before the darkness swallowed him whole. The floor sealed shut. The screams stopped. Only silence remained. Vanessa descended the stairs, her smile cold, her hand slipping into mine. The house chooses Ethan always. I should have felt horror. Instead, I felt relief. The fire spread from the fallen lantern, climbing the walls, devouring the curtains. Smoke thickened the air, and for a moment I thought the house might truly burn. But then I realized the fire wasn't consuming the house was consuming the fire. The flames bent inward, vanishing into the walls until nothing remained but scorched air. The wood gleamed unburnt, the drapes hung untouched. It was as though the blaze had never existed. Vanessa's eyes glowed in the dim light. Do you see now? Nothing can touch it, nothing can end it, not even death. And in that moment I understood the final truth. The Hollow House wasn't haunted, it was the haunting. That night I stood at the window staring into the storm, wondering if there was any piece of me left untouched. Grace's voice whispered from behind, soft, coaxing. Vanessa's hand slid into mine, firm, possessive, and the house groaned around us, its heartbeat syncing with mine. I realized then that Eleanor had been wrong. The house wasn't killing me, it was remaking me, piece by piece, breath by breath. Until there was no Ethan Cole anymore, only another voice in the endless night. And so I stopped resisting. I let the shadows seep into me. I let Vanessa guide me deeper. I let Grace's whispers fill my dreams. Because the night had no ending, and now neither did I. Ravenwood whispered about me now in voices louder than the storm. The townsfolk no longer pretended to look away when I passed. Their eyes followed me, accusing, suspicious, afraid. Every smile had become a sneer, every handshake a tightening noose. Word spread quickly in small towns, and Ravenwood was no exception. Nathaniel's disappearance, his sudden vanishing after stepping into the Hollow House, became the thread that unraveled what little tolerance the people had left for me. He went in there and never came out, I overheard one morning at the market, their words hushed but sharp enough to cut. They say the house ate him. No, the devil living in it did. I knew they meant me. I tried to stand tall, to project calm. But inside I felt the threads tightening around me. Every whispered rumor, every accusing glance wove itself into a web designed to trap me, strangle me, and brand me guilty long before truth ever emerged. And still I couldn't leave. The Hollow House had seen to that. Vanessa, of course, was unbothered. Let them talk, she said one evening as she poured wine into crystal glasses, her laughter light as silk. Fear makes them predictable. Fear keeps them away. And the farther they stay, the safer we are. I stared at her, my hands trembling around the glass. Safe? Nathaniel is gone. Grace is gone. Eleanor vanished into the storm. We are not safe, we're prisoners. Her smile widened, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Prisoners? No, Ethan, we're the wardens. The house keeps us, yes. But it also keeps them out. It shields us, it feeds us. Can't you feel it? I wanted to argue, to scream that the house was not a gift, but a curse. But the words died in my throat. Because deep inside, some part of me did feel it. The power, the pulse, the certainty that I belonged here. And that terrified me more than anything the townsfolk could say. The web of lies spread further than Ravenwood streets. The constable came knocking, his face grim, his questions pointed. People are worried, Cole, he said, shifting uncomfortably in the parlor as Vanessa leaned back in her chair, calm as ever. First Grace, then Nathaniel. They say no one goes into this house and comes out again. I forced a laugh, brittle and unconvincing. Superstition. You know how gossip is in a small town. But he didn't smile. His eyes lingered on me, heavy, searching. If you know something, you'd best say it now. Secrets don't stay buried long in Ravenwood. Before I could respond, Vanessa interjected smoothly. Constable, my husband and I are still grieving. The house has been nothing but a place of mourning for us. Perhaps you should remind the townsfolk of that instead of indulging their fantasies. Her tone was sweet, but her words cut like knives. The constable shifted again, uneasy, his gaze flicking between us. Finally, he muttered something about keeping the peace and left, though I knew peace had already fled Ravenwood long ago. As the door shut, Vanessa turned to me, smiling triumphantly. You see? Lies are threads, Ethan, and we weave them better than they do. I said nothing, because I wasn't sure which of us she was lying to, him or me. But it wasn't just the townsfolk spinning lies, it was me. Every time I walked into the village, every time someone asked where Nathaniel had gone, or why Eleanor hadn't been seen in weeks, or why Grace had wasted away so suddenly, I lied. I lied through clenched teeth, through sweat-soaked palms, through the gnawing certainty that every word was building a gallows beneath my feet. I don't know. She left town. He'll be back. Each lie was a stone, and soon I carried a mountain on my back. The house seemed to mock me for it, its whispers twisted into the voices of those I deceived, repeating my lies in tones dripping with malice. He'll be back. She left town. I don't know. Until I began to doubt if the lies were mine at all, or if the house had spoken them first. And the pressure grew unbearable when the church turned its eyes on me. Father Whitlock visited one Sunday evening, his Bible clutched to his chest, his gaze sharp with both pity and suspicion. You are a man of sin, Ethan Cole, he said quietly as the rain hammered the windows. You've broken vows, spilled innocent blood, and brought darkness into this town. But even now, redemption is possible. Confess, and perhaps God will spare your soul. His words cut deeper than the constable's threats, deeper than the villagers' whispers. Because for a fleeting second I wanted to confess, I wanted to pour it all out. The affair, the poison, the house, the voices, Nathaniel's screams, Grace's hollow eyes. But then Vanessa's hand touched mine, her grip ironclad, her smile serene. Father, she said softly, our souls are already spoken for, and they are not yours to redeem. Whitlock's face blanched. He stumbled back, muttering prayers, crossing himself before fleeing into the storm. As the door closed, Vanessa whispered in my ear, lies are useless now. Truth itself bends for us. And I realized then that she believed every word. But the truth was still out there, tangled in the web I had spun. And webs do not remain intact forever. They tear, they unravel, they ensnare the spider as easily as the fly. I began to fear the day my lies would no longer hold, because when they broke, the night would devour me whole. The lies grew heavier with each passing day, and I wore them like a cloak woven from poisoned threads. Every encounter with the townsfolk demanded another deception, every question another brick in the wall closing in around me. But the worst lies were not the ones I told others. They were the ones I told myself. I told myself that Grace's death had been fate, not murder. That Nathaniel had fallen by chance, not by design. That Eleanor had chosen to vanish rather than being swallowed by the storm that hung over the Hollow House. And every night, when the whispers grew louder, I told myself they weren't real. But deep down, I knew the truth. The house wanted me to drown in the lies. because lies were chains and every chain bound me closer to it. The villagers began to test me. One afternoon, I stopped at the blacksmith's for a repair. The man's hammer rang against the anvil, his eyes never leaving me. When I asked about my order, he smirked, his voice sharp. Funny how people go missing around you, Cole. Your wife, Nathaniel, even that hollow girl. You got a knack for collecting ghosts? His laughter was cruel, but it carried across the square. Heads turned. Murmurs rose. I felt the heat of 100 eyes on me, burning holes through my skin. I forced a smile, though my throat was dry as ash. People leave. That's life. But the lie fell flat, and I knew they could hear the crack in my voice. The blacksmith leaned in, his breath hot with smoke. One day we'll dig up the truth. And when we do, no house on this cliff will save you. I left before my trembling hands betrayed me. At night, the house replayed the encounter. The whispers mimicked the blacksmith's voice, repeating his threat until it burrowed into my skull. One day we'll dig up the truth. I tried to shut them out, but Vanessa only smiled when I told her. Let them dig, she said, her tone almost gleeful. They'll only bury themselves deeper. Lies are weapons, Ethan, and you're still learning how to wield them. Her confidence unsettled me more than the villagers' suspicion. Because she was right, the lies weren't just shields anymore, they were daggers. And sooner or later, someone would bleed. The web began to tighten when letters arrived. Anonymous notes slipped under the door, written in jagged scrawls that reeked of desperation and fury. Murderer, we see you. The night will not hide you forever. I burned them in the fireplace, but their ashes lingered in my chest. One morning I found a message carved into the gate itself. Grace cries for justice. The letters bled red as though written in rust or blood. I confronted Vanessa, demanding if she had seen who did it. She only shrugged, her smile taunting. They want to scare us, but fear is their lie, not ours. Ignore them. But I couldn't, because the name etched into that iron gate was not just Grace's, it was mine. The constable returned, this time less as a peacekeeper and more as a predator circling prey. Where were you the night Nathaniel disappeared? He asked sharply, standing in the dim glow of the parlor. Here, I said quickly, at home, with Vanessa. He turned his gaze to her. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes gleaming, her lips curving into that serene smile that unnerved me more with each passing day. Of course, she said softly. He never left my side. The constable studied us, suspicion dripping from his stare. He didn't believe me. He didn't believe her. But he had no proof, only whispers. Be careful, Cole, he finally muttered. Lies can strangle quicker than ropes. When he left, I turned on Vanessa. Why did you cover for me so easily? She laughed, brushing her hair over her shoulder. Because I don't need to lie, Ethan. The house does it for me. He didn't believe us because he doesn't want to believe us. People fear the truth. Lies are easier to swallow. Her words slithered into me like poison. The tension finally snapped at the tavern. I had gone there against my better judgment, desperate for something normal, something human. But normality had long abandoned me. The moment I walked in, silence fell. Dozens of eyes fixed on me, hard and hateful. I forced myself to the bar, ordered a drink. My hand trembled as I lifted it, the ale bitter on my tongue. A voice cut through the silence. Where's Nathaniel, Cole? It was Jacob, one of Nathaniel's closest friends. His broad frame filled the room, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with fury. I swallowed hard. I don't know. A murmur rippled through the tavern. The words I had said 100 times before, but this time they sounded weaker. Jacob stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. You do know, and one day you'll pay for it. The tavern erupted in mutters, curses, accusations. I fled before they could do more than spit their venom. But as I stumbled into the night, I knew the web was closing. Back at the Hollow House, Vanessa welcomed me with open arms, her smile serene. You see, they're choking on their own lies now. Soon they won't know what's truth at all, and that is when we'll own them. Her voice was velvet, her embrace warm, but I could not shake the feeling that the web wasn't hers to weave. It belonged to the house, and I was already tangled beyond escape. The storm outside the Hollow House was nothing compared to the storm inside my chest. Lies had begun to spiral out of my control, multiplying like weeds in a poisoned garden. What started as a few deceptions to keep suspicion at bay had grown into an intricate maze where even I couldn't tell where truth ended and fiction began. And in Ravenwood, that confusion was spreading. The villagers no longer whispered, they shouted. Groups gathered outside the tavern muttering about justice, about vengeance. Candles burned in the church windows every night, prayers rising for deliverance from the evil on the hill. From me. And still the house pulsed with quiet laughter in my bones. One evening I stood in the parlor with Vanessa, the storm rattling the shutters, when I asked her something that had haunted me for weeks. Do you ever wonder if the lies will catch us? She looked at me with those glittering eyes, her smile too calm, too knowing. Catch us? Ethan. The lies don't hunt us, we hunt with them. They are our weapons, our armor. Let them try to pierce it. They'll choke on their own doubts before they ever touch us. Her words should have soothed me. Instead, they curdled my stomach, because I realized that she no longer distinguished between truth and lies. To her, they were one and the same, and if I stayed much longer, they would be for me too. The following morning, I received another note, slipped under the door. This one wasn't jagged or furious, it was calm, neat. Truth always finds a way through the cracks. For some reason, this note frightened me more than the others, because it didn't come from rage or desperation. It came from certainty. Whoever wrote it didn't just suspect me. They knew. I burned the note like the others, but the words remained etched in my mind, whispering louder than the flames. That same day, I discovered footprints in the mud outside the window. Too fresh, too deliberate. Someone had been watching. The web was no longer just whispers and suspicion. It was tightening, closer. Real. That night, the house showed me another vision. I was walking the corridors, my candle trembling in my hand, when the walls began to ripple like water. Faces emerged, Grace's, Eleanor's, Nathaniel's. Their mouths moved, but no sound came. Finally, one voice broke through. Nathaniel's. They know. I dropped the candle, the flame sputtering out on the carpet, plunging me into darkness. The faces melted back into the walls, leaving me gasping, clutching my chest. When I told Vanessa, she only smiled. The house is reminding you. The truth is theirs, Ethan, but the night is ours, and the night always wins. Her certainty chilled me. Days passed, and the villagers grew bolder. They stopped hiding their hatred. Some spat when I walked by. Others crossed themselves as though warding off evil. Children were dragged indoors at the sight of me, shutters slammed closed in my wake. The constable returned a third time, his face harder, his patience gone. Cole, he said bluntly, You're a marked man in this town. If you don't tell me what happened to Nathaniel, if you don't give me something, I can't hold them back." My throat closed, the words sticking like ash. "I told you," I whispered. "I don't know." His jaw tightened. "Then may God have mercy on you when they come." As he left, I realized with sinking dread that he wasn't protecting me anymore. He was preparing to bury me. The tension snapped one evening when I heard shouting outside the hollow house. Torches flickered in the distance, voices chanting, furious, unified. "Murderer! Monster! Burn the house!" I froze at the window, terror clawing through me. They had come. The web had closed. Vanessa, however, laughed, a chilling, delighted sound. She clapped her hands as if welcoming a long-awaited performance. "Let them come," she whispered. "The house has been waiting." I begged her to flee, to hide, but she only shook her head. Flee from what? Lies? Fear? No, Ethan. This is where the night proves itself. The mob drew closer, their torches swaying like fireflies in the storm. The roar of their voices shook the air, and the hollow house began to stir. The floor trembled beneath my feet, the walls groaned, the windows rattled with a sound like laughter. The house was awake. The front doors swung open on their own. The storm outside seemed to die, the wind holding its breath. The villagers froze at the threshold, their torches flickering, their courage wavering. Then a voice whispered through the halls, Grace's voice, hollow and echoing. "Enter and be devoured." The mob broke. Some screamed, dropping their torches, others fled into the storm. Only a handful remained, their rage stronger than their fear. They stepped forward, crossing into the house, and the doors slammed shut behind them. The screams began almost immediately. I stood frozen in the parlor as shadows writhed along the walls, stretching, clawing, swallowing the intruders one by one. Their torches guttered out, their cries fading into silence. Vanessa stood beside me, her eyes alight with ecstasy. "Do you see, Ethan? Lies brought them here. Lies trapped them. And now, the house feeds." When the silence returned, only the echo of their terror remained, and I realized with a sick twist in my gut that she was right. The lies hadn't just bound me, they had lured others into the trap. The web was not mine alone. It belonged to the night. The hollow house was silent after the storm of screams faded, but it was not peace. It was digestion. The air hummed as if the walls themselves were savoring the terror that had seeped into the wood. The smell of smoke lingered, though nothing had burned. The echoes of footsteps lingered, though no one remained. I could not move. My hands shook, my chest burned with the weight of what I had witnessed. People, my neighbors, men and women who had once nodded politely in the streets, were gone. Swallowed whole. Erased as though they had never lived, and I had done nothing to stop it. Vanessa glided through the aftermath like a queen among ruins. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright. She looked more alive than I had ever seen her. "Do you see now?" she whispered, her voice trembling with delight. "This is truth, Ethan. Lies bring them close, and truth devours them. That is the way of the night." I turned on her, my voice breaking. "They were innocent." She tilted her head, smiling coldly. "Were they? They called for your blood. They carried fire for your house. Innocent? No, Ethan. They were flies, and the web caught them." "That is justice." Her words wrapped around me like chains. The next day, Ravenwood was hollow. The streets were quiet, the tavern dark, the church bells silent. The villagers who remained avoided my eyes altogether, fleeing into doorways, shutting shutters as I passed. Fear no longer whispered. It screamed in silence. I should have felt relief. With their numbers broken, their fury silenced, I was safe. But instead I felt trapped. Because the web had grown so large that it no longer needed hunters. I wasn't weaving the lies anymore. The lies were weaving me. That night I sat in the study, staring into the fire that would not burn, the flames that only bent toward the walls. I thought of Grace's laughter, of Eleanor's searching eyes, of Nathaniel's fury. All gone, all silenced. I asked myself the question I had avoided for weeks. When did the lies stop protecting me? When did they begin devouring me? And the house answered. From the shadows of the study, Grace's voice whispered, "When you spoke the first one." I turned sharply, and there she was again. Hollow-eyed, pale, her dress trailing like mist. She leaned close, her breath icy. "You lied when you chose her. You lied when you poisoned me, and now the lies own you." I wanted to scream that she was wrong, that the lies had been survival, not choice. But the truth choked me. Because in that moment I remembered every false word, every broken vow, every step deeper into the night. And I knew she was right. Days blurred into nights. Vanessa grew more radiant, more untouchable, as if the house was feeding her strength. I, on the other hand, withered. Sleep brought no rest. Food turned to ash in my mouth. My reflection in the glass grew hollow, gaunt, my eyes rimmed with shadows, and always the whispers. The lies I had told returned to me in chorus, voices overlapping, rising, crashing, until they were indistinguishable from screams. She left town. I don't know. He'll be back. She was sick. It wasn't me. Over and over, a cacophony of my own deceit, until I could no longer tell if I was hearing them or speaking them. One evening, the constable returned again, alone. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, as though he had not slept in days. "You think I don't know," he rasped, standing in the parlor, his hand trembling on the hilt of his pistol. "You think the others don't see it? They vanish in your house, every one of them, Grace, Nathaniel, the Hollow Girl. Now half the damn village. Do you think I'll just let it go?" I tried to speak, but no words came. Vanessa stepped forward instead, her smile sweet as poison. "Constable," she murmured, "the night is already inside you. Haven't you felt it? Haven't you heard it whisper in your prayers?" His face crumpled. He raised the pistol, aiming at her. His hands shook violently, sweat pouring down his face. "Don't," I whispered, my voice raw. But he fired. The gunshot echoed through the house, the smoke curling in the air. Vanessa staggered back, her white dress blooming red. For a moment I thought she was gone. Relief, grief, horror, all tangled in a single heartbeat. Then she laughed. The blood sank back into the fabric. The wound sealed as though it had never been. Her smile widened, her teeth gleaming too sharp in the firelight. The constable dropped the pistol, his face twisting in terror. He stumbled back, whispering prayers before bolting for the door. The house did not let him leave. The doors slammed, the shadows surged, and his screams were swallowed whole. Vanessa turned to me, unscathed, radiant. "Lies cannot kill us, Ethan. Even bullets are just another story they tell themselves, but the night, it is real." I collapsed to my knees, sobbing. From that night on, no one dared approach the Hollow House. Ravenwood became a ghost town, its remaining villagers fleeing, abandoning their homes, leaving windows boarded and doors locked. The church bells fell silent, the market stalls emptied. Ravenwood died. And the lies that had bound me spread over the empty streets, clinging to abandoned walls, weaving their way into every shadow until the town itself felt like an extension of the Hollow House. I no longer left the house. There was nowhere to go, nothing beyond the web. On the final night, I sat in the study with Vanessa, her hand resting lightly on mine. She smiled, her voice soft, almost tender. You see, Ethan, the lies were never chains. They were wings, and now we are free. But I knew then what she refused to admit. We weren't free. We were trapped in the endless night, prisoners of the web we had woven, unable to escape, unable to die, unable to live. And the truth, the only truth left, was that the lies had won. Because the night that never ended wasn't outside, it was inside me. But the past has a way of surviving, even when entire towns crumble into silence. I thought Ravenwood was finished, that the villagers' hatred had burned itself out the night they stormed the Hollow House and vanished inside it. I thought the whispers would settle, that the house would finally be content. But the past does not vanish because we demand it. It lingers, presses against the walls, bleeds into the floorboards. It waits. I first felt it when I wandered into the attic. I hadn't planned to go there. The stairs creaked under my feet and the air grew heavy with dust and mildew. But something urged me upward, as though invisible hands guided my steps. When I pushed open the warped wooden door, I found a single box waiting for me in the center of the room. It was not there before. I was sure of it. The box was old, its wood splintering, its brass latch corroded with age. My fingers trembled as I opened it, and inside I found photographs, stacks of them, yellowed and curling at the edges. I pulled one out and my breath caught in my throat. It showed a family standing on the porch of the Hollow House. A father, a mother, 2 children. Their expressions were stiff, forced, their eyes wide as though they were trying to hold back fear. I picked up another. A different family, but the same porch, the same warped shingles, the same crooked windows. A third, a fourth. Dozens of families, all posed in front of the Hollow House, all with the same haunted look in their eyes, and the house, it had not aged. The same paint, the same rot, the same shadow crouching behind the glass. The Hollow House had been here forever, luring families into its grasp. And now, it had me. I carried the box downstairs, my heart pounding, my hands shaking so badly that the photographs spilled across the table in the parlor. Vanessa was there, reclining elegantly on the chaise, a book open in her lap, though her eyes had never left me. When she saw the photographs, her lips curved into that smile that both comforted and terrified me. "Ah," she said softly, as though she had been expecting this moment. "The house wanted you to see." I pointed at the photographs, my voice trembling. "Who are they? Where did these come from?" She leaned forward, brushing her fingers across one of the images. "They are the shadows of those who came before us. Every soul who thought they could live here. Every lie they told to survive." Her words tightened the air in my chest. I stared at the faces in the photographs. The mother with hollow eyes, the boy clutching his father's sleeve, the girl whose forced smile looked more like a scream. "Where are they now?" I asked, though the answer was already in my bones. Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. "They are the house, Ethan, just as you will be." The room seemed to tilt. The air grew colder. And for the first time I realized that Vanessa was not afraid of the house. She belonged to it. On that night, I dreamed of the families. They filled the hallway, dozens of them, their translucent faces pale in the moonlight. Their eyes locked on mine as they reached out, their fingers brushing my arms, cold and damp like grave soil. Their mouths opened. But no words came, only hollow gasps, sighs that echoed like wind through the rafters. Then one voice broke through, Grace's voice. "You brought us here." I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the echoes still humming in my ears. But the worst part was not the dream. It was that I could still hear them. The whispers hadn't stayed in my sleep. They lingered in the walls of the hollow house. The past began bleeding into the present. Doors creaked open on their own, revealing rooms filled with shadows that flickered between memory and reality. One evening I entered the study and saw Grace sitting by the window, brushing her hair, humming softly as if she had never died. When I blinked, she vanished. Another night I saw Nathaniel pacing in the hallway, his Bible clutched to his chest, his lips moving in frantic prayer. His voice echoed faintly, trembling before fading into silence. But the worst was Eleanor. I found her in the dining room, her hands gripping the edge of the table, her face pale and desperate. She mouthed something, "Help me," before dissolving like smoke. Vanessa, of course, seemed delighted. She followed the apparitions with her eyes, smiling, even speaking to them as though they were honored guests. "They're watching," she whispered once, her hand brushing mine. "They're learning from you." Her calmness sickened me, because I realized then that the past wasn't haunting us, it was judging us, and it was waiting for its verdict. The hollow house grew louder after that night. The whispers no longer confined themselves to corners or corridors. They swelled through every room, rising and falling like the tide. At times they sounded like prayers, at others like curses. Sometimes they even seemed to mimic my own voice, repeating the lies I had told. "She's gone to visit family. I don't know where he went." It wasn't me. Each phrase pierced deeper, cutting away the fragile barrier I had built between truth and survival. I tried to shut them out, but the house had no doors thick enough, no walls strong enough to contain the echoes of guilt. One evening I descended into the cellar to fetch wine. The stairs creaked beneath me, the air damp and foul. But when I reached the bottom, I froze. The cellar was filled with chairs, dozens of them arranged in a semicircle as though waiting for an audience. On each chair sat a figure, pale and hollow, their eyes locked on me. Grace was there, her hair loose, her smile thin and cruel. Nathaniel sat beside her, his Bible in his lap, his fingers tapping the cover as though beating out a silent judgment. Eleanor clutched her shawl, her lips trembling, and behind them more. Faces from the photographs in the attic, families I had never met but now knew intimately. They said nothing. They only stared, and then in unison their mouths opened. "You cannot escape us." The sound was not human. It was the groan of wood, the howl of wind, the moan of the house itself. I stumbled backward, knocking over a bottle, the glass shattering across the floor. When I looked again, the chairs were empty. But the air still vibrated with their voices. I told Vanessa what I had seen, my words tumbling out in desperation. She listened, calm and serene, her expression almost indulgent. "They are reminding you," she said softly. "Reminding you that the past does not fade. You carry it with you, Ethan, whether you accept it or not." "I can't live like this," I whispered, my voice breaking. Her smile was faint, pitying. "You don't live in the house, Ethan. The house lives in you." Her words struck me harder than any threat, because I realized deep down that she was right. The next day I ventured into town, if it could still be called a town. Ravenwood was nearly empty. The streets were barren, the shops boarded, the church doors chained shut. Only a handful of villagers remained, moving silently through the ruins of their lives. When they saw me, they stopped. Their eyes followed me with hatred, with fear. A woman spat at the ground. A man muttered a prayer. I wanted to cry out, to tell them the truth, to confess everything. But the words would not come. My tongue was shackled by lies. As I turned to leave, a boy stepped out from an alley. He couldn't have been older than 10, his clothes torn, his face pale. He stared at me with eyes far older than his years. "They said the night would end," he whispered, "but it didn't. It never ends." Before I could respond, he vanished into the shadows. I returned to the hollow house with those words echoing in my skull. That night, the dreams returned sharper than ever. I stood in a courtroom, the walls made of rotting wood, the ceiling dripping with water. The jury box was filled with the families from the photographs, their hollow eyes fixed on me. Grace stood as the prosecutor, her voice ringing like broken glass. "You lied." Nathaniel slammed his Bible onto the table. "You murdered." Eleanor wept, her tears turning black as they hit the floor. "You betrayed." I looked for Vanessa, desperate for her defense, but she was not there. I was alone, surrounded by the ghosts of my sins. The gavel struck, a sound like thunder. "Guilty!" I woke screaming, my hands clutching the bedsheets, my chest heaving. Vanessa lay beside me, her eyes open, watching me with that same knowing smile. "The past has spoken," she whispered, "but the night still holds you." The whispers grew unbearable. I heard them even in daylight, even when I pressed my hands over my ears. They followed me outside, into the woods, into the town. They whispered from the river, from the churchyard, from the graves. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. One evening I tried to confront them. I stood in the parlor, the photographs scattered across the floor, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, "and what will end this?" For a moment, silence. Then slowly the air thickened, the fire in the hearth dimmed, and one voice rose above the rest. "Confess." The word rattled through the walls, vibrating in my bones. I staggered back, my knees weak. Confess. The demand was simple, inevitable. But to confess was to destroy myself. I found Vanessa in the library, her fingers tracing the spines of books that had no titles. She turned to me, her smile unchanged. "They want me to confess," I said, my voice breaking. Her eyes glimmered. "Of course they do. But confession is a lie dressed as truth. Do you really think the house will let you go so easily?" I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "Then what do I do?" Her hand brushed my cheek, her touch cold and tender. "You endure, Ethan. You endure until the night swallows you whole. That is the only way." Her words filled me with despair, because I knew then that there would be no release, no redemption. The past would never let me go. The whispers did not fade after their demand. They grew sharper, more insistent, until every corner of the hollow house pulsed with one word. Confess, confess, confess. It haunted me like a heartbeat, constant and unrelenting. Even in the stillness of midnight, when the world seemed to hold its breath, the word pulsed through the walls, through the floorboards, through my skull. At first I resisted. I tried to bury myself in silence, in denial. But the house does not allow silence. It fills every gap, every hesitation with reminders of the past. I saw Grace more often now. She appeared in the mirror as I shaved, her eyes accusing, her voice a whisper behind my ear. "You poisoned me?" Eleanor's shadow stretched across the dining room table, her mouth forming the words, "Help me," again and again, her eyes wide with terror. Nathaniel stalked the hallways, muttering his prayers, his Bible bleeding ink onto the wooden floor. And the others, the families from the photographs, pressed closer. They crowded the stairwell, leaned over the banisters, filled the windows with pale faces. The hollow house groaned under their weight, yet it never broke. Each apparition demanded the same thing, confess. But to whom? To Vanessa? To the ghosts? to God or to myself. One night, unable to bear it, I stumbled into the church. The doors creaked open with effort, the pews coated in dust, the altar cracked and crumbling. The priest was long gone, the town abandoned. Yet as I knelt before the altar, I felt the weight of countless eyes upon me. The candles lit themselves one by one until the church glowed with a flickering light. "Forgive me," I whispered, my voice raw. "Forgive me for the lies. Forgive me for the blood." For a moment, silence. Then the voices rose in chorus, louder than ever, shaking the rafters. "Too late. Too late. Too late." The pews filled with shadowy figures, their hollow eyes burning with rage. Grace stood at the front, pointing at me. "You don't seek forgiveness, you seek escape." Nathaniel thundered behind her. "And there is none." The ground beneath me cracked, the floorboards splitting, blackness yawning below. I fell back, scrambling toward the door, the shadows reaching for me, their hands cold and clammy. I burst into the night air, gasping, the church collapsing into darkness behind me. Even there, outside the sanctuary, the voices followed, "Confess." When I returned to the Hollow House, Vanessa was waiting at the threshold. She looked radiant, her skin glowing in the moonlight, her smile sharp as ever. "You went to them," she murmured, her tone a mixture of amusement and disappointment. "I had to try," I said, my voice breaking. Her eyes gleamed. "You don't understand, Ethan. Confession is another lie. Do you think truth will free you? It never does. It only tightens the web." I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but her calmness disarmed me. She took my hand, led me inside, and for a moment I let her, desperate for any comfort. But even her touch felt colder now. The days blurred. The Hollow House no longer felt like a place, but like a living organism pulsing with memory, breathing lies. The photographs in the attic multiplied, new faces appearing, their expressions mirroring my own despair. And then I saw it, a photograph of myself, standing on the porch of the Hollow House, my eyes wide, my smile strained. Vanessa at my side, her hand gripping my arm. I dropped the photo, my stomach lurching. It was not possible. It could not be possible. But there it was, evidence that I, too, had already become one of them. The house had claimed me before I even realized it. And that night I confronted Vanessa. I stormed into the parlor, the photograph clenched in my fist, my voice shaking. "What is this?" I shouted. "How long have I been here? How many before me? Tell me the truth." She only smiled, tilting her head, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "The truth? Oh, Ethan, the truth is that the night never ends. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone who belongs to the Hollow House." Her laughter rang through the halls, echoing with the whispers until I could no longer tell where her voice ended and the house began. The past had caught me. There was no escaping it, no bargaining with it. Every lie I had told, every crime I had hidden, every shadow I had ignored, it was all part of the same web. And now I was tangled in it. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, the whispers grew louder, closer, until they were no longer outside me, but inside me. Confess, 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 and at last I understood. The night that never ended was not the darkness outside. It was the darkness within. The Hollow House had bled me dry. For weeks, perhaps months, though time had no meaning anymore. I had endured the whispers, the shadows, the endless demand for confession. But something inside me snapped that night. The moment I realized the night was not only around me, but inside me, I felt a shift. Not surrender, not acceptance, something darker. Rage. I woke before dawn, my body trembling, my hands clenched into fists. The house whispered as always. its voices weaving through the walls, chanting their demands. Confess, confess, confess. But instead of bowing my head, instead of cowering beneath their judgment, I screamed, "No!" The walls shuddered. Dust rained from the rafters. The whispers faltered for the first time, as if shocked into silence. My chest heaved, my throat raw. "You want the truth?" I shouted into the darkness. "You want confession? Fine. I will confess, but not to you. Not to your shadows. I will tell the truth on my own terms, and you will listen." The house groaned, wood splitting like bones, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I stormed into the library, the place where Vanessa often lingered, and found her waiting, as though she had anticipated my fury. She sat by the fire, her dress flowing like smoke, her lips curled in that ever-present smile. "You've reached the breaking point," she said softly, almost tenderly. I wondered how long it would take. I slammed the photograph onto the table, the one that showed me already claimed by the house. "What is this? How long have I been here? Answer me." Her eyes flickered with amusement. "Time is irrelevant here. The night stretches, folds, repeats. You are both the beginning and the end." My head spun. "No more riddles, Vanessa. I want answers." She leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "The answer is simple, Ethan. The house does not want your confession. It wants your collapse. It wants the moment you realize there is no way out but through." Her words ignited the rage inside me further. "Then I'll burn it down." Her laughter echoed, sharp and cruel. "Many have tried, none have succeeded. The hollow house is not wood and nails. It is memory, it is guilt. It is you." Determined to defy her, I gathered supplies, kerosene from the shed, matches from the kitchen, every candle I could find. If the house was memory, then I would scorch it clean. The whispers grew frantic as I worked. "Don't. Don't. Don't." Their panic only fueled me. I drenched the curtains, the floorboards, the photographs from the attic. The smell of kerosene thickened the air until I could barely breathe. My hands shook as I struck the first match, the tiny flame flickering in the dark. For one glorious second, I thought it would work, that the fire would spread, that the house would crumble, that I would finally be free. But the moment the flame touched the kerosene-soaked floor, it fizzled. Smoke curled upward, then dissolved into nothing. The match burned down to my fingers, searing my skin before sputtering out. I lit another and another. Each one failed. The house laughed. The walls shook with cruel, mocking mirth. "Did you think fire could destroy what is already ashes?" Vanessa's voice floated from the shadows. She stepped into the room, untouched by the smoke, her eyes glowing. "The house does not burn, Ethan. You do." I collapsed onto the floor, the burnt matches scattered around me, my hands blistered. The rage curdled into despair. I could feel the walls closing in, the whispers returning stronger, louder, angrier. "Confess, confess, confess." Vanessa knelt beside me, her hand brushing my cheek. For a moment, she almost looked kind. "This is the breaking point, Ethan. The moment where you either shatter or become part of the house forever." Her words wrapped around me like chains. I wanted to resist, to scream again, to fight. But the weight of it all, the lies, the murders, the endless night, pressed down too heavily. My vision blurred, my body trembling. And then faintly another voice broke through. Not Grace, not Nathaniel, not Eleanor, my own voice. "You can still end it." I lifted my head, startled. Vanessa's smile faltered just slightly, as though she too had heard it. The whisper came again, echoing in my skull. "You can still end it, but not with fire, not with lies, with truth." My chest heaved. Was it madness? Or was it the one thread the house had overlooked? the fragment of myself that refused to surrender. Vanessa's eyes darkened. "Don't listen to it," she hissed, her voice sharp now, stripped of its false sweetness. "That is the last lie the house feeds. Truth won't save you, it will consume you." But for the first time I saw fear in her expression, and that gave me strength. I rose to my feet, unsteady but determined. "Then I will confess," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my bones. "Not to the house, not to you, to myself." The walls quaked, the whispers shrieking in fury. Vanessa's face twisted, her smile gone, her beauty curdling into something monstrous. "You fool," she spat. "You'll destroy yourself." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it will be mine." I turned toward the parlor, toward the photographs that still littered the floor. My heart pounded, my throat dry, but I knew what had to come next. The breaking point was here, and I would meet it with truth. And I stood in the parlor, the photographs scattered like bones across the floor. Each face stared up at me. The families, the victims, the echoes of lives swallowed by the hollow house. My hands trembled as I knelt, the wood groaning beneath me. The whispers swelled, angry, frantic. "Confess, confess, confess." I drew a shaky breath. "Fine," I whispered. "You want truth? You'll have it." The air stilled. The fire in the hearth guttered low, shadows stretching along the walls. Even Vanessa, standing near the window with her eyes glowing faintly, seemed to pause as though the house itself leaned in to listen. And so, I began. "The first lie was Grace," I said, my voice cracking. "I told everyone she left because she was unhappy, because she couldn't bear Ravenwood anymore. But the truth..." I choked on the words. My throat felt lined with glass. "The truth is, I poisoned her." The flames surged, casting the room in sudden light. The shadows hissed, shifting like smoke. Grace's apparition flickered in the corner, her face pale, her lips blackened. She smiled, cruel and knowing. "I wanted her gone," I continued, tears burning my eyes. "She threatened to expose me. She knew what I had done before, what I planned to do again. She was too dangerous." The whispers rose, a chorus of fury. "Murderer! Murderer!" I pressed my hands to my ears, but it was no use. The words clawed at my skull, branding themselves into my flesh. Still, I pushed forward. "The second lie was Nathaniel." My voice shook, but I forced it louder. "I told the town he lost his mind, that grief drove him to madness, but the truth..." My stomach turned. I could taste bile on my tongue. "The truth is, I pushed him. I fed his fears, his obsessions until he broke. I made sure he never escaped the hollow house." Nathaniel appeared at the far end of the room, his Bible clutched in one hand, his lips mouthing endless prayers. But when he looked at me, his eyes were no longer frantic. They were steady, condemning. "I destroyed him because he got too close," I whispered. "Because he was right. The house had already claimed me, and I couldn't let him tell the world." The whispers crescendoed, shaking the windows, rattling the floorboards. "Liar, betrayer, murderer." Vanessa tilted her head, watching with fascination, her lips curling into a strange smile. Not joy, not malice. Something closer to hunger. I staggered toward the table, gripping its edge for balance. My confession poured out faster now, like floodwaters breaking a dam. "Eleanor," I whispered. "I told her I loved her. I told her she was safe. But I used her. I used her grief, her loneliness to keep her close. When she begged me to leave, I lied. I told her we couldn't, that the house wouldn't let us. But the truth is..." My voice cracked, breaking into sobs. "The truth is, I kept her here because I didn't want to face the night alone. I let the house consume her piece by piece until nothing was left. Eleanor's shadow slid across the wall, her eyes hollow, her lips trembling. She reached toward me, not with accusation but with sorrow. That made it worse. I let her die, I whispered, because I was a coward. The room roared with fury. The chandelier swayed, glass shattering as it crashed to the floor. The photographs ignited, flames racing across them, though the fire never spread beyond the images themselves. Each face burned, their eyes blackening, their mouths opening in silent screams. But the confessions didn't stop. Before all of them, before Grace, Nathaniel, Eleanor, there were others. Families who trusted me, strangers who believed me. I told them the house was safe. I told them it was cursed only by rumor. I convinced them to stay, to settle, to make a home here. And every single one of them, my chest heaved, my voice shattered. Every single one of them died. And I let it happen. The flames flared higher, the walls splitting with cracks that revealed darkness beyond. The photographs shriveled into ash, their faces twisting in agony. The air thickened with smoke and whispers, louder than thunder, louder than screams. Confess, confess, confess. I lied to them, I screamed, tears streaming down my face. I lied to everyone, I lied to myself. And now there's nothing left but this house, this night, and the truth I can't escape. The room convulsed. The floor buckled, the ceiling bowed. Vanessa laughed, her voice sharp and wild. Yes, she cried. Yes, Ethan, finally the truth. Don't you see? This is what the house wanted all along, not silence, not denial, but your soul laid bare. Her laughter mingled with the whispers, the house vibrating with energy, as though feeding on my confession. The shadows swarmed, twisting, writhing, filling every corner, every breath. I fell to my knees, my body racked with sobs. The truth poured from me, unstoppable now. A flood that drowned every last lie. I am the curse, I whispered, not the house. Me. I brought the night. I kept it alive. I will never escape it. The house roared in triumph, and for the first time I wondered if confession had freed me or destroyed me completely. The house did not quiet after my confession. It howled. The walls trembled with glee, the whispers swelling into a chorus of triumph. My truths had not silenced them, they had fed them. The hollow house feasted on every word, every sin I dragged into the light. I clutched my chest, my heart pounding as though it would burst. My breath came ragged, each inhale laced with smoke, each exhale carrying fragments of lies I no longer had strength to hold. Across the room, Vanessa glowed. Her form shimmered, shifting as though the house itself poured its essence into her. Her beauty sharpened, too perfect, too blinding, until it hurt to look at her. "You've done it," she said, her voice layered with the echo of 100 others. "You've broken. You've given yourself to the truth. Now the night owns you." I shook my head, trembling. "No. I confessed for me. Not for the house, not for you." Her smile thinned. "And yet here you are, on your knees, drowning in your sins. Do you really think this makes you free?" The whispers surged, overlapping until they became unbearable. "Stay. Stay. Stay." The floor split beneath me. Darkness yawned, deep and endless, tendrils of shadow curling upward like hands reaching to drag me under. I staggered back, my heel catching on broken wood, barely keeping balance. Grace rose from the fissure, her face pale, her lips blackened from poison. "You killed me," she whispered, "and now you will join me." Nathaniel followed, his Bible dripping ink, his eyes aflame with judgment. "You twisted me. You made me mad. Now you will share my torment." Eleanor appeared last, her shadow thin and trembling, her eyes filled with sorrow. You promised me safety, you gave me death. They surrounded me, their voices binding tighter than chains. The ground shook, the walls split, and the ceiling cracked open to reveal nothing but black sky. I stumbled back until I reached the hearth, the cold stone pressing into my spine. There was no escape. Not from them, not from the house, not from myself. And then faintly that other voice rose again, the one that had cut through before, my own. You can still end it. I froze. The apparitions faltered, their mouths closing as if silenced by something greater. Vanessa's smile vanished, her eyes narrowing. No, she hissed. Don't listen. That is not salvation. It is destruction. But I did listen. The voice was mine, yes, but not the broken, terrified version of me that had cowered for so long. This voice was firm, steady. The version of me that still believed I could choose. You are the curse, it whispered. So you are the cure. I rose, weak but defiant. No, I said, my voice breaking but growing louder with each word. I am not yours. Not anymore. The house shrieked, the sound of 1,000 windows shattering at once. The apparitions lunged, their hands cold as ice, clutching my arms, my throat. I gasped, struggling, but the inner voice pushed harder. Finish it. I staggered toward the fire. The hearth was dim, only embers glowing faintly, but it called to me. Not to burn the house, not to destroy it with flames. That had failed. But to burn myself. To end the curse at its source. No! Vanessa screamed, her form twisting, monstrous now. Her beauty peeled away to reveal hollow sockets and a mouth too wide, filled with endless teeth. She lunged for me, but the shadows recoiled as I thrust my hands into the embers. Agony seared my flesh, but I did not pull back. I fed the fire with every truth, every crime, every lie I had carried. The embers roared, flames rising higher, white and pure, brighter than anything the hollow house had ever known. The apparitions shrieked, their forms unraveling in the blaze. Grace melted into smoke, Nathaniel's prayers burned to ash, Eleanor's sorrow dissolved into sparks. The whispers screamed, clawing, desperate. No, stay, stay! But the fire consumed them all. And then, silence. The house groaned one last time, a sound like a dying breath. The walls shuddered, the ceiling collapsed inward, and the floor split wide. But instead of darkness, instead of shadows, light poured in. Blinding, searing, unstoppable. Vanessa shrieked, her form disintegrating, her smile twisting in fury. You fool, you'll end us all. And then she was gone. The hollow house burned, not with flame, but with truth. Every lie I had told became fuel, every hidden crime a spark, until the night itself began to crack. The endless darkness thinned, shredded by light. I fell to my knees, my body broken, my hands charred, but for the first time the whispers were silent. The night had ended. When I awoke, I lay in the ruins. The hollow house was gone, reduced to ash and rubble. The town of Ravenwood was empty, its streets silent, but the air was different. Clear. No whispers, no shadows. I stood unsteady, my body aching. The scars on my hands throbbed, but I felt lighter, as though a weight had been carved from my chest. The night had ended for the house, for the town, but not for me. Because in the silence I knew one thing remained true. The hollow house lived in me, and no matter how far I ran, no matter how much truth I confessed, some nights never truly end. The hollow house was gone. I should have felt relief as I stood among its ruins, the air clear of whispers, the night sky at last broken by the pale light of dawn. But relief never came. Instead, there was only silence, and silence after so much noise felt worse. I staggered through the wreckage, the ash clinging to my skin, the ground still warm beneath my feet. The charred remains of the parlor lay scattered, photographs reduced to soot, shadows burned away into nothing. But something wasn't right. The town of Ravenwood should have stirred to life with the house's destruction. The families who once lingered in shadows should have returned. The church should have rung its bells in celebration. But Ravenwood remained empty, its streets hollow, its windows dark. It was as though the town had never existed at all. I wandered down Main Street, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the still air. Storefronts stood untouched, yet lifeless, like stage sets abandoned after the play had ended. The barber's chair sat empty, scissors glinting faintly in the early light. The diner's clock ticked on the wall, but no one sat in its booths. The schoolyard's swing swayed gently, though there was no wind. A creeping dread tightened in my chest. Ravenwood wasn't free, it wasn't saved, it was gone. The realization struck like a blade. The Hollow House hadn't only consumed those within its walls, it had devoured the entire town. And though I had burned the house with truth, the cost had been everything. I was alone. And the silence pressed closer with every step. My thoughts echoed in it, growing louder until I could barely tell where they ended and the world began. You did this. You destroyed them all. The night ended, but the day belongs to no one. I pressed my palms to my ears, desperate to shut it out, but it was not the whispers of the house this time. It was my own voice, dozens of versions of it, accusing, mocking, condemning. No, I rasped, stumbling to my knees in the middle of the road. I ended it. I freed us. But even as I spoke, I knew the truth. Freedom meant nothing if there was no one left to share it. I stumbled toward the church, its steeple still standing tall, though its doors sagged from rot. Pushing them open, I stepped inside. The pews were empty. The altar cracked, the candles long extinguished. Dust drifted through the beams of light that cut across the room. But I wasn't alone. At the front of the church, someone knelt at the altar, a figure I knew too well. Vanessa. I froze. She should have been gone, burned with the house, dissolved into ash. Yet there she was, her dark hair spilling down her back, her hands folded in prayer. She rose slowly, turning toward me. Her face was untouched, perfect as ever, her smile sharp and knowing. You thought you destroyed me, she said softly, her voice carrying through the empty church. But you cannot destroy what you are. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. You're dead. I saw you burn. Her laughter rang like bells, sweet and chilling. Did you really think it was that simple, Ethan? The Hollow House was never a place. It was a reflection, a mirror of the rot inside us. Burn the house and the rot still festers. My breath hitched. No, I ended it. You ended nothing. She stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The night still lives in you, and it will follow you until you descend. Descend where? I whispered, though I already feared the answer. Her smile widened. Into yourself, into the final darkness. That is where the truth waits. That is where this story ends. I turned and fled. Her laughter followed me out of the church, chasing me down the empty streets, echoing through the hollow town. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing at the edge of Ravenwood, where the road should have led out of town. But it didn't. The road ended in nothing. Beyond Ravenwood stretched only blackness, an endless void where the world should have been. The horizon had vanished, the trees gone, the sky swallowed whole. It was as though the town floated in a sea of emptiness, cut off from the rest of existence. No, I whispered, tears burning my eyes. This can't be real. But it was. The night had ended, but the world had ended with it. And I was trapped. As I knelt at the edge of the void, Vanessa's voice drifted to me once more, soft as silk. Do you see now, Ethan? The Hollow House was never your prison, you are. And the descent has only just begun. Her laughter echoed, and the silence swallowed me whole. The edge of Ravenwood crumbled beneath my hands. One moment, solid ground. The next, a nothingness so deep my stomach turned just from staring into it. The void was alive, not empty but seething, pulsing with a darkness older than the house, older than me. It breathed, and then it pulled. The ground collapsed and I fell. And there was no sensation of air, no wind whipping against my face, only weightlessness, a descent into silence. My body should have screamed with terror, but instead it felt eerily calm, as though the fall was not against my will, but inevitable. Images flashed around me. Grace's face, her lips blackened with poison. Nathaniel clutching his Bible, screaming prayers that turned to ashes. Eleanor's hollow eyes staring through me. One after another, they spiraled in the void, not like ghosts, but like memories unchained, demanding to be remembered. Then the images changed. I saw myself as a boy standing outside the Hollow House for the first time, clutching my father's hand. I remembered his voice. "This place will be yours one day, Ethan. Guard it well." Guard it, not from others, from myself. And the descent ended abruptly. I landed hard, my body sprawling against cold stone. Groaning, I pushed myself up and looked around. I was in a cavern. The walls dripped with water, yet when I touched the moisture, it burned like acid. Shadows crawled along the rocks, but they had no source, no torch, no flame. They slithered on their own, alive. In the center of the cavern stood a mirror. It was enormous, framed in rusted iron, its surface dark but glimmering faintly as though it breathed. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't me as I was now. It was me as I had been when I first entered the Hollow House. Younger, unscarred, unbroken. His eyes were bright, almost innocent, though even then there was something lurking beneath. He smiled, and the cavern trembled. "You finally came," the reflection said. His voice was mine, but smoother, colder. "I wondered how long you'd delay." I staggered back, my chest tight. "What are you?" "I am you," he said, stepping forward. Though he moved inside the mirror, it was as though he stood before me, every detail sharp. "The part you buried, the part you lied about. I am the one who wanted the house, who wanted the power, who enjoyed the lies." I shook my head. "No, that's not true." "Isn't it?" His smile widened. "You confessed, didn't you? All the crimes, all the betrayals, but you left out one thing." My mouth went dry. "What?" "That you liked it." The cavern shook harder. The shadows writhed, circling us both, hissing like snakes. "You didn't just kill Grace because she threatened you," the reflection sneered. "You relished it. Watching her choke, watching her eyes dim, it thrilled you. You didn't just push Nathaniel into madness. You orchestrated it. You loved the way his faith crumbled. And Eleanor? You kept her because you wanted control. You wanted to own someone. You always wanted it, Ethan." "Stop," I whispered, but he pressed closer, his palms flat against the glass. "You are not the victim. You are not the cursed. You are the curse." The mirror cracked. Splinters of glass spiderwebbed across its surface, glowing faintly. Each fracture revealed another version of me, dozens, hundreds, each twisted in a different way. One with blood dripping from his hands, one laughing maniacally. One whispering lies into a child's ear. One holding a knife over Eleanor's sleeping form. All of them me, all of them grinning. The cavern filled with their voices, layered, mocking, chanting. "We are you. We are you. We are you." I fell to my knees, clutching my ears, screaming. But the sound was inside me, not outside. I couldn't shut it out. "Look at us," the reflection hissed, pressing harder against the mirror. "You confessed to crimes. Now confess to pleasure. Admit you wanted it. Admit the night never ends because you don't want it to." I forced myself up, trembling. "No," I rasped. I hated it. I hated every second. Liar. His eyes glowed, burning into me. "You can lie to the house. You can lie to them, but not to me. I am the dissent. I am the truth beneath the truth." I staggered closer to the mirror, fists clenched. My reflection matched my movements, smiling wider. "If you admit it," he whispered, "you will finally belong. The house, the night, the void, it will all embrace you. No more guilt, no more pain, only truth." For a moment, I almost gave in. His words filled the cracks in me, tempting, soothing. To surrender would be easy. To admit that I had enjoyed it would end the torment. But then I remembered Eleanor's eyes. The sorrow, not the accusation. Grace's laughter before the poison. Nathaniel's desperation to save me, not himself. They hadn't wanted my destruction. They had wanted me to fight it. And I realized something. The reflection was right. I had wanted it. Once. But wanting was not the same as being. I was not the man I had been. Not anymore. I slammed my fists against the mirror. The glass shuddered, cracks widening, the reflection screaming in fury. My younger self snarled, his perfect face twisting. "You can't kill me," he shrieked. "I am you. You kill me, you kill yourself." "Then so be it," I whispered, and I struck again. The mirror exploded, shards flying outward, slicing my skin. Light poured from the fractures, flooding the cavern, drowning the shadows. The reflections screamed as they dissolved, their voices stretching, breaking until only silence remained. I collapsed, bleeding, gasping, but alive. The mirror was gone, and for the first time I felt a sliver of peace. But in the silence, Vanessa's voice returned soft as ever. "You think you've won," she murmured. "But this is only the second descent. There is one more, the deepest. And there, you will see the truth even you cannot destroy." The cavern shook. The ground split again, revealing another void below. And I was pulled down once more. The second fall was worse than the first. There was no stone this time, no cavern, no mirror. Only blackness without depth, without end. My body felt stretched, pulled apart strand by strand until I wasn't sure if I was falling through the void, or if the void was falling through me. And then came the voices, not whispers, screams. They tore through me like knives, each one a confession I had buried deeper than the last. Not just crimes, not just lies, but hungers. Desires. Every dark thought I had ever silenced roared to life here, raw and undeniable. I covered my ears, but the sound came from inside. You wanted to watch her die. You liked their fear. You were never the victim. You were the storm. "No!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "That's not me anymore." But the void disagreed. Shapes formed in the blackness. Not ghosts, not reflections, but people. Real people I had known, touched, harmed. Grace, Nathaniel, Eleanor, my father. Faces I had tried to justify away, choices I had painted as necessity. They stood in a circle around me, their features clear, their bodies solid, their voices unified. "You cannot kill what you are." The ground appeared beneath me suddenly, smooth and polished like obsidian. I stood at the center of an endless black plain, no horizon in sight. The circle of figures tightened around me, their eyes glowing faintly, their voices overlapping. Confess again. Confess deeper. Confess what you are. "I already confessed," I screamed, clutching my head. "I told everything." Grace stepped forward. Her face was calm now, no poison, no fury. "Not everything," Nathaniel followed, his Bible gone, his eyes steady. Confession without acceptance is just another lie. Eleanor placed a hand on my arm, her touch cold but gentle. Tell the truth beneath the truth, or you will never leave. The plane shifted. In the distance, a figure appeared, taller than me, cloaked in shadows, its form shifting with every step. I squinted, my breath hitching, until I saw its face. My own. But this wasn't the young reflection I had shattered. This wasn't the cruel smile in the mirror. This was me now, scarred, broken, weary. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "You've been fighting shadows," he said quietly. "But shadows mean nothing without the body that casts them. That body is you." I staggered back, shaking my head. "No. I destroyed you. I destroyed them all." He stepped closer. "You can destroy lies, you can destroy mirrors, but you cannot destroy yourself." His eyes locked with mine, and in that instant I understood. This was the final descent. Not into the house, not into the void, into me, and there was only one way out. The circle of figures began to chant softly, a rhythm that echoed with my heartbeat. The plane darkened further, swallowing the light, leaving only me and me. My double reached into the shadows and pulled out something gleaming. A knife. Its blade long, curved, shimmering faintly as though it carried both light and darkness at once. He held it out to me. "Confess the last truth," he said. "The truth you've hidden even from yourself. And when you do, choose." My hands shook as I reached for the knife. Its weight was immense, heavier than anything I had ever carried, as though all the crimes of my life pressed into its steel. "What truth?" I whispered. He leaned closer, his voice almost tender. "That you never wanted freedom. You wanted the night to never end. Because in the night, you could be what you truly are." The words sank into me like hooks. Was it true? Had I fought the house because I hated it, or because I feared losing it? The thrill, the power, the chaos, it had given me something daylight never could. The circle tightened, their eyes burning. "Confess," they whispered. "Confess." I sank to my knees, the knife heavy in my hands. And I confessed. "Yes," I whispered, tears burning down my face. "I wanted it. I wanted the lies, the fear, the power. I wanted the night to never end. I wanted it all because in the darkness I didn't have to be ashamed." The void roared, the plane trembling, the figures shuddering. My double smiled faintly, nodding. "There it is," he murmured. "The final truth." The knife pulsed in my hands, glowing now, its blade alive with fire. "Now choose," he said. The two paths opened before me. One was light, blinding, searing, promising release. To drive the knife into my heart would end it, end me, end the night, true freedom. The other path was shadow, velvet, endless, whispering promises of power. To drive the knife into him, into myself, but not me, would bind me to the night forever. I would not be free, but I would be infinite. Light or shadow, death or eternity, both were me. Both were truth. I rose slowly, the knife burning in my grip, my eyes locked on my double. His expression never changed, calm, patient, as though he already knew my choice. "Do it," he whispered. "Either way, the night will know you." The circle of figures leaned closer, their voices merging into a final chant. "End it, end it, end it." I raised the blade. My body trembled, my breath shuddered, and I chose. The knife plunged forward, the plane shattered. The void screamed. Light and shadow exploded together, blinding, consuming until there was nothing left but silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in ash once more. Ravenwood was gone. The hollow house was gone. The void was gone. Only me remained. And in my hand, faintly glowing, was the knife. The night was over. But whether it had ended, or whether it lived in me forever, remained a truth I would carry into eternity. The ash still clung to my hands when I opened my eyes. My chest rose and fell in ragged bursts, lungs burning as if I had been holding my breath for centuries. The knife still lay across my palm, faintly glowing, whispering a truth too vast for words. But the silence was louder. Ravenwood was gone. The hollow house was gone. Even the void had vanished. I stood alone in a barren expanse of cracked earth and lifeless air, as if the world itself had ended and left only me behind. And yet, I was not alone. The figures appeared slowly at first, like shadows crawling out of the ash. Grace, Nathaniel, Eleanor, my father. Then more, the families from the photographs, the children from the hallways, the countless faces the house had devoured over centuries. They surrounded me, silent at first, their eyes burning with something I could not name. Not anger, not forgiveness. Something heavier. Expectation. "Why are you here?" I whispered, clutching the knife tighter. Grace stepped forward. Her skin was whole again, her lips unmarked by poison, her eyes clear. "Because you are not finished." "I confessed," I said quickly, almost desperately. "I gave everything. I told the truth. I chose." Nathaniel's voice thundered with quiet conviction. "Confession without revelation is only half the path. You have admitted what you are. Now you must understand why." The words struck harder than any blade. Why? The barren world around us shimmered, and suddenly it was not barren. The ground rippled, shifting into streets I recognized. Ravenwood, whole and alive. The church bells rang. Children laughed in the distance. The diner lights glowed warm against the dawn. It was Ravenwood as it should have been, but I knew it wasn't real. Grace led me through the streets, her steps silent against the cobblestones. The others followed, their faces watchful, unblinking. We stopped before the hollow house, whole again, its shingles intact, its porch sturdy, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. Not a ruin, not a nightmare. Beautiful. "This is what you wanted," Eleanor said softly. "Not the horror, not the void. A home, a life, a place where you belonged." I shook my head, my chest tightening. That house was never this. It was a cage. My father's voice cut through the air, sharp as memory. "A cage only becomes a cage if you refuse to hold the key. You had it all along." I turned toward him, my heart pounding. "What are you saying?" He met my eyes, and for the first time his face softened. "The night never ended because you did not want it to. You wanted the lie of the house because it was easier than the truth of yourself. But the truth isn't that you loved the night. The truth is that you feared the day." The words rippled through me, deeper than confession, deeper than guilt. I had been so consumed with the crimes, the lies, the power of the night. I had never asked why I needed it. And now, standing before the perfect hollow house, I understood. The night gave me purpose. The house gave me identity. Without them, who was I? A boy abandoned by his father's expectations? A man too weak to stand in daylight? The night had never been endless because I loved it. It had been endless because I could not bear to face what waited when it ended. "Do you see now?" Grace whispered, her eyes shining. Tears burned down my face. "Yes," I whispered, "I see." The hollow house shimmered again, its beauty fading, its wood rotting, its windows blackening. The true house returned, ugly, broken, hungry, but I no longer trembled at the sight. I lifted the knife, its glow brighter now, alive with a steady hum. The crowd of faces watched silently as I stepped forward, crossing the porch one final time. The door swung open on its own. Inside, the house waited, not whispering, not mocking, silent, expectant. I entered. The parlor was as it had been the first night, the chandelier gleaming, the curtains drawn, the photographs watching. Only now the house seemed smaller, weaker, no longer infinite, no longer endless, just walls and wood. Vanessa sat in the armchair, her dress pristine, her smile unchanged. "I wondered if you'd return," she purred. I tightened my grip on the knife. "This ends now." Her laughter rang out, soft but hollow. "End? There is no end, Ethan. I am not the house. I am you." "I know," I said calmly. "And that is why you lose." Her smile faltered. I raised the knife high, the glow filling the parlor, spilling light into every crack, every shadow. The walls groaned, the chandelier shook, the photographs curled and blackened. Vanessa hissed, her form twisting, stretching into shadow, her eyes blazing. "You cannot kill me," she shrieked. "I am your hunger. I am your fear. Without me, you are nothing." "Then I will be nothing," I whispered, and I plunged the knife into the heart of the hollow house. The scream that followed was not hers, not the house's. It was mine. A sound ripped from the deepest part of me, a howl of grief, rage, and release all at once. The house shattered around me, its walls exploding into dust, its windows imploding in a shower of glass. The light from the knife consumed everything, Vanessa, the shadows, the whispers, even the foundations beneath my feet. And then, silence. Real silence. For the first time, the night truly ended. The silence pressed against my ears until it hurt. I opened my eyes slowly, expecting ash, expecting void, expecting nothingness. Instead, I saw sky. Not the endless black of Ravenwood's curse, not the seething void of the descent. Real sky. Morning sky. Pale blue streaked with pink soft clouds drifting lazily. I was lying on grass. Real grass, damp with dew, cool beneath my fingers. For a moment, I simply breathed, in, out, my lungs filled with clean air, free of smoke, free of poison, free of the weight that had crushed me for what felt like a lifetime. The night had ended, or so I thought. I sat up slowly, my body aching but intact. The knife was gone. My hands were empty. Around me stretched an endless meadow, wildflowers blooming in clusters, their petals catching the dawn light. Birds sang. A river glimmered in the distance. It was beautiful, too beautiful. "Is this real?" I whispered to no one. "It is what you chose." The voice came from behind me. I turned, heart pounding. Grace stood there, radiant, her hair catching the light, her smile warm and free of malice. Beside her was Nathaniel, his shoulders relaxed, his eyes no longer tormented. Eleanor, too, her hands clasped, her face peaceful. Behind them, dozens of others appeared, the children, the townsfolk, the forgotten souls of Ravenwood. They were whole again, glowing faintly, like figures carved from light. I stumbled to my feet, my throat tight. "You're free?" Grace nodded. "You freed us. The house no longer holds us." I swallowed hard, a sob clawing up my chest. "Then it's over." Nathaniel's expression softened. "For us, yes. For you, not yet." And the meadow darkened. Shadows stretched long across the flowers, the sky dimming as though the sun had been pulled behind a veil. The figures remained bright, but their faces grew somber. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice trembling with something between sorrow and hope. "You destroyed the house. You faced yourself. But freedom comes at a cost." My stomach sank. "What cost?" Grace's gaze pierced through me, gentle but unyielding. The house lived because you lived. Its hunger was born of yours. When you cut it down, you cut yourself open. You cannot walk away untouched. I don't understand. You will. And the meadow rippled, dissolving like smoke. I staggered, the ground shifting beneath my feet until I stood once more in Ravenwood. But it wasn't Ravenwood. The streets were empty. The buildings half faded, their walls translucent. The diner flickered, its sign glowing faintly before sputtering out. The church steeple stood cracked, the bells silent. It was a ghost of the town, not alive, not dead. And I was the only one standing. "What is this?" I shouted, panic tightening in my chest. Grace's voice echoed around me, though I could no longer see her. "This is your Ravenwood, the one you built, the one you must live with." My breath came ragged. No, I freed you all. I destroyed it," Nathaniel's voice answered, steady but grim. "You destroyed the house. But the night was not only the house, it was you. And now you must choose how to carry it." The town shimmered again. Suddenly people filled the streets, laughing, shopping, living. But none of them saw me. I walked among them, invisible. I reached out to touch a woman's arm. My hand passed through her like smoke. I ran to the church, pushed through the doors, shouted for Nathaniel, but the pews were empty. I ran to the diner, called for Grace, but only silence answered. I was alone, surrounded by life, but cut off from it. The realization sank into me like ice. This was the cost. I had ended the night for them, but for me, the night had simply changed shape. A desperate one, I screamed into the empty air. "What do you want from me?"
We have
The
been
answer came from within,
you.
my own voice, echoing, "To live with yourself." I stumbled, clutching my head. "No, that's worse than death." And yet it is life. The streets dissolved again, the people vanishing, the buildings fading until once more I stood in the meadow. The sky was darker now, the horizon burning faintly with twilight. Grace appeared before me one last time. "You are not damned," she whispered, "but you are not free either. You must carry the weight of both. That is your revelation." Tears blurred my vision. "So I am cursed after all." Her expression softened. "Not cursed, chosen. The night may have ended for us, but for you it will always linger. Whether it destroys you or redeems you, that is yours to decide." She touched my cheek, her hand warm. And then she was gone. They all were. I stood alone once more. The meadow stretched endlessly, but I knew the truth now. It wasn't heaven. It wasn't freedom. It was a mirror, a reflection of the weight I had to carry until the end of time. The knife was gone, but its glow remained inside me. Not light, not darkness. Both. The night had ended, but the man who lived through it would never leave it behind. And that was the revelation. The night has ended, but the shadows are never truly gone. Somewhere another secret waits to be uncovered, and another crime is already unfolding in the dark. If this story kept you on edge, hit like, share it with friends, and subscribe to Dark Pulse so you don't miss the next chilling mystery. Turn on the notification bell because the next night might begin sooner than you think.